as if he felt that he would be able to defeat Harry in today's matter. The wolf guard didn't care what kind of steward he was, or what kind of duty he had. Seeing that what he said was a blatant lie, and that he was certain that the wolf guard had stolen something, he couldn't hold back his anger any longer. Without waiting for Harry's instructions, he lifted his foot and prepared to beat up this steward. However, once the wolf guard moved, the palace guards all raised their weapons. "Don't move. Take down anyone who dares to move." It seemed like they were about to fight. Harry stopped his aggressive subordinates. "Calm down," Harry said. Each and every one of the wolf guard panted heavily and said in a muffled voice, "How can we still calm down? They are clearly lying." Harry said angrily, "You also know that they are deliberately lying. This is the trap that they have set. They are just waiting for you guys to make a move." This steward didn't want to do anything to Harry. He didn't dare to hurt him. However, he could use dirty tricks to anger Harry's subordinates. As long as Harry's subordinates couldn't bear it, they would make a move here. Then the steward would have a legitimate reason to arrest Harry and his men. It would also cause Harry to lose some respect, and it would make Harry look weak. This was the first time Harry had returned to his family in more than 10 years, but he had been humiliated. As one of the heirs of the family, Harry was the only one who wasn't under the control of the family council. When he left, everyone knew that Harry was being suppressed by the council. This was obviously beneficial for the rise of the family council's prestige. Therefore, this steward was clearly slandering Harry's subordinates. There was no need to negotiate with him. Now that Harry was in the territory of the council, the bargaining chips in his hands were limited. Although he really wanted to let his men take action. However, it was a bad idea to make a move, and it was completely useless. He had brought about a total of about 100 people from the Wolf Guard, but the number of guards in the palace numbered several thousand. In the face of an absolute disadvantage in numbers, there was still no hope of winning. Harry asked coldly, "You said that those things are gone, so you suspect that my people took them? This is very unreasonable, right?" Harry knew very well that this steward wasn't going to let this matter go so easily. However, Harry couldn't use force. If he attacked, he would be the one to suffer. Therefore, he could only hold back his anger and argue. The steward chuckled. He looked like he was having a good time. He said, "Mr. Harry, everything was on display near the side hall. Your men have been down there. That is a little suspicious." Harry said with a cold smile, "What side hall? My men have been waiting outside the hall. There are so many palace guards watching. Don't tell me that my men can turn invisible. Had I known that, I'd have brought 1,000 more of them." The steward snorted. "That might not be the case. I've seen crazier things." Harry glanced at him and asked, "Then what do you want?" The steward smiled sinisterly and stretched out a finger. "It's very simple. Just let the palace guards search your subordinates. Whether or not the things were stolen by them, it will be clear after a search." "We didn't steal anything at all. Why don't you search yourselves first?" the wolf guard said angrily. They knew that they were innocent. They were clearly being slandered. Asking for a search of his men was an insult to Harry. Harry wasn't willing to let his subordinates suffer like this. The wolf guard were all proud people. Harry was also a proud man. Harry flatly refused this unreasonable request. "Impossible. You don't have the right to search my men." The steward pretended to be helpless and spread his hands. "Then there is no other way. We can't find what was stolen, so I'm sorry you're going to be leaving alone." After saying that, he looked at the wolf guard and sneered. "As for your men, no one is allowed to leave this place until the items are found." Harry frowned. He was extremely angry in his heart. This steward had used such a dirty trick on him, but he couldn't retaliate in an advantageous manner. After all, a puny steward like him was easy to deal with. But this steward still had 4 counselors behind him. In this place, Harry's strength was insufficient, so he couldn't go against the counselors behind him. Therefore, Harry's brain worked quickly, trying to find a way to get rid of this annoying steward. However, after thinking about it, Harry realized that he couldn't do anything about it. However, the steward continued to press forward step by step. "Mr. Harry, you have to make a decision quickly. I have to get those items back." Harry wasn't afraid of those old men in the council, but he couldn't help his subordinates get rid of suspicion. While he was in a dilemma, Harry accidentally looked up and saw a surveillance camera in an inconspicuous corner of the corridor. He immediately thought of the palace of the Parker family. It has been advancing with the times these years. It was once guarded by people. Now that technology had developed, surveillance cameras were installed everywhere. The entire palace was monitored. Harry thought that it would be great if Stephen was here. With his powerful hacking skills, he would be able to hack into the monitoring center of the palace. After finding the surveillance footage, he would be able to clear the suspicion of Wolfguard. However, Stephen wasn't here. Even if Harry informed Stephen now, he wouldn't be able to take out the recording evidence from thousands of miles away. This was because the surveillance network in the palace wasn't connected to the outside world. Without data, Stephen wouldn't be able to hack into the palace through the network. Just as Harry felt that it was a pity, his eyes lit up again. Although Stephen wasn't here, the bionic human was there. The mechanical bionic human had its own intelligent terminal. Apart from its powerful combat strength, it also had a powerful electronic information ability. The mechanical bionic human's built-in super AI intelligence wasn't just for show. Apart from being able to simulate a real personality, it also had all kinds of high-level knowledge stored inside. Finding the designated recording from the surveillance was a piece of cake. Thinking of this, Harry laughed very happily. The steward was baffled. However, the steward's doubt only lasted for a moment. Very soon, he also smiled. There was no way to resolve Harry's predicament this time. He could either search Harry's subordinates on the spot or detain his subordinates. Then, he would leave with his tail between his legs. There was no other way. It seemed like Harry had accepted his fate. The steward thought happily. He even thought that after Harry bowed his head, he could go back and claim credit from the men in the council. Just as the steward was daydreaming, Harry instructed his subordinates to make a move on the camera above their heads. Although the location of the surveillance camera was very high, this wasn't difficult for the bionic human to reach. With a light jump, the bionic human reached the camera. He directly pulled out the circuit on the top and connected it to an open port on the palm of his hand. Harry didn't expect the steward to agree to let him look at the recording of the surveillance video. He understood that they were framing him. Therefore, by letting the bionic human remove the surveillance camera on top of his head and hack into all the monitoring servers from here, they would be able to produce evidence. "What are you doing?" the steward yelled. When the steward saw Harry ordering his subordinates, he felt a little puzzled at first. However, he could only watch helplessly as one of the men jumped more than 4 meters into the air, reached to the top of the corridor, and took off the surveillance camera. The steward was a little frightened. Harry was going to find something from the surveillance footage. "Stop! Come down quickly! This is an important area of the palace. I won't allow you to destroy it." The steward turned pale with fright. Of course, Harry wouldn't listen to him. The steward became anxious. He immediately ordered the palace guards, "Quick! Stop them!" The palace guards didn't hesitate at all. They immediately rushed forward, wanting to stop the bionic human. However, they had underestimated the bionic human's strength. They couldn't even get close enough to grab his clothes to pull him down. The Wolf Guard were working hard to keep the palace guard occupied. Just as the two sides began to clash with each other, the bionic human had connected to the surveillance network. Very quickly, they found the recordings of today's events in the side hall. Then, the bionic human walked slowly back to Harry. The bionic human transmitted the data to Harry's phone. Even Harry was shocked by the speed. He didn't expect that the bionic human would be able to hack into the monitoring server so quickly. After opening the file, Harry quickly browsed through the video. The Wolf Guard could be seen clearly too far away from the objects to have stolen them. When Harry entered the main hall to meet the council members, the Wolf Guard was waiting outside the main hall. In the side hall, it was the steward who brought a few people and took away the treasures that were stolen. After watching the video, Harry sneered at the steward. "What a thief!" The steward was no longer as fearless as before. He couldn't refute the concrete evidence. In the face of Harry's ridicule, cold sweat flowed down his forehead. The steward stammered, unable to speak. Harry shouted at the palace guards who were still in conflict with the Wolf Guard. "All of you, stop! The thief has been found." Everyone looked over in surprise. When they heard the steward accuse Harry's subordinates of stealing the treasure, they thought that what the steward said was right. Without any evidence, they wouldn't wrongly accuse him or his men. They didn't expect the steward and a couple of the workers to be thieves. The palace guards didn't know who to trust. Many of the guards just stared at each other, not knowing what to do. Of course, Harry knew that most of these palace guards were just following orders. They didn't have any hostility towards Harry. Although they could feel that the family council didn't like Harry, they didn't know why. However, it was impossible for the conflicts between the upper echelons of the family to implicate the guards. Of course, everyone knew that this steward wasn't really a thief. He was merely hiding the items and using it as a pretense to slander Harry. "You've been lying this whole time. You were the one who took it away. Why would you lie about my men so casually?" Harry asked with a smile that wasn't a happy smile. The steward was speechless for a moment. The steward was drenched in sweat and he didn't know how to reply to Harry's question. Obviously, Harry wasn't going to forgive him. He sneered and said, "I'm still a member of this family and you just work here. Is it commonplace for a steward to accuse an heir, knowing that it is all a lie?" "No, I didn't." "You still want to deny it? An act like this comes with a serious punishment." Harry held his hands behind his back and walked around the steward. Looking at this guy's fat head, Harry knew that this steward was taking advantage of everyone that he could. Otherwise, he wouldn't have looked like a fat pig. This steward had offended Harry. If he wasn't taught a lesson, others would think that Harry was a pushover. Harry made up his mind to punish this ignorant man. According to the family rules, this kind of offense is punished with 100 whips. Harry pretended to think for a while and said. The steward immediately shouted, "I'm a servant of the council. Mr. Harry, you don't have the right to do this to me." The steward figured that he could use the family council to protect him from any punishment that Harry was going to dish out. He had been wrong thinking that Harry was afraid of the council. "Men, grab him! 100 lashes! I want him to know the consequences of framing me and my men!" Harry shouted loudly. When the Wolf Guard heard Harry's order, they were eager to exact this punishment. Just now, they had had enough of this steward's lies. Now, they finally had the chance to vent their anger. None of them wanted to stand at the side. They all wanted a piece of the action. The problem was, it was impossible for all of the Wolf Guard to execute their punishment. They came up with the solution that each member of the Wolf Guard would get to give him 1 lashing each. When the steward heard the heated discussion amongst the Wolf Guard about how to distribute the punishment fairly, he broke down. Looking at the burly faces of the Wolf Guard, he knew that each lashing would rend his flesh open. The steward didn't want to be tortured, and even more so, he didn't want to be beaten to death. In fear, he ordered the palace guards who were standing at the side, not knowing what to do. "Why are you standing around? Hurry up and save me!" He was now under the control of the Wolf Guard. The Wolf Guard, whose arms were thicker than a normal person's thighs, grabbed his arms and pressed him to the ground, making him unable to move. Hearing the shout of the steward, the palace guards subconsciously took 2 steps forward. However, they were frightened by Harry's cold gaze. "All of you better stand there obediently. If you dare to help him, all of you will be punished as well." The palace guards obediently stood where they were and didn't dare to move. They had sworn an oath to uphold the Parker family rules. Even if the council didn't like Harry, he was still family. Anyone who dared to oppose him would be courting death. They had been following the steward without knowing that he was the one who stole the items in the first place and was the one framing Harry and his men. Now the truth had come out, and the palace guards couldn't believe that they had been misled. The steward looked at the palace guards who were indifferent to his call for help, and his heart instantly dropped. "Please spare my life. I didn't mean anything I said. I think I went crazy for a moment there, but now I see clearly," the steward shouted in despair. Harry smiled. "You're a special kind of man. You're happy to lie and slander my men while you know the truth. Now you ask me to be kind to you? Please spare me." Harry shook his head and gestured to the Wolf Guard. "Give him everything you got. I better not catch any of you holding back." The Wolf Guard burst into laughter. "Don't worry, we're all eager to get a piece of him." The guards were overjoyed. Finally, it was time to vent their anger. They pulled the steward's shirt off, revealing the rolls of fat around his body. "This is going to be fun," one of the Wolf Guard couldn't help but say excitedly. "There's so much fat, each lashing is going to cut nice and deep." The people beside him laughed. When the steward heard these discussions, he was scared out of his mind. He had been working for the council for so many years, and it was always him who held his head high in front of the other members of the family. Now he was nothing but a punching bag for Harry's men. The sound of the heavy whip rang out. Every time it hit the steward, it would hit his fat, causing him to howl in pain. Each lashing was long and drawn out, and waiting for every member to get a turn to use the whip made the pain worse. The gap between each whip made him feel as if every second was as long as a year. However, he soon felt less pain. His body was going into shock. After the steward received a dozen or so whips, he rolled his eyes and fainted. The Wolf Guard excitedly discussed it for a long time. Then, someone brought water from the pond from the courtyard and splashed it all on the steward's face. The steward finally woke up after being stimulated by the cold water. He had just woken up, and his eyes were still filled with confusion. The steward waved his hand randomly. Tears and snot were hanging on his face as he begged for mercy from Harry. "I know I was wrong. Please spare my life." The steward thought he could gather some sympathy from Harry if he acted submissive. Unfortunately, Harry would never be soft-hearted to his enemies. Harry stared at the fat steward as each lash rang out in the courtyard. All 100 of the Wolf Guard had gotten the chance to vent their anger on the steward. Harry thought it incredible that the steward was still alive. The Wolf Guard wouldn't let this steward go just because he looked pitiful. For someone who was hostile to him, letting him go was equivalent to making fun of his own safety. Therefore, the steward's sentence ended when the palace guards chose to stand by and watch. 100 lashings, no more, no less. The steward was barely breathing. Harry walked forward and nudged him with the tip of his foot. Seeing that there was no movement, he turned around and clapped his hands. He ordered his guards, "All right, we're done. Let's go." Harry took his men and headed back to their motorcade. After Harry left, the family council sat in the dark of the hall. Instead, they were still sitting in their own seats. No one said anything. They stayed still, just like 4 statues. A guard ran into the hall in a panic. "The steward, he's been..." The guard ran so fast that he couldn't catch his breath. After a long time, he couldn't utter a complete sentence. "What's wrong with the steward?" a council member asked. Harry punished him and had him lashed 100 times. "He's barely breathing," the guard was able to say with bated breath. The serious-looking council member slammed his hands on the table. "Utter garbage." "Are you talking about the steward?" the guard asked. He thought that the men of the council would be angry with Harry after hearing the report, but he didn't expect them to scold the steward. The guard immediately understood that the steward only lied and accused Harry and his men under orders from the council. He could only ask, "Council, should we send someone to go treat the steward's wounds? For someone as useless as him? No, let him die on the ground." A council member spoke, and the remaining 3 members maintained their silence. The council members were just going to let the steward die from his wounds. The guard could only accept the order and respectfully withdraw from the hall. After he left, the hall returned to silence once more. After a long while, someone spoke. "Harry, can't stay here. This kid has great ambitions. We should get rid of him before he gets too far out of our reach." 3 council members reached a consensus after a few words, but another council member asked in confusion, "I don't understand. Harry is just a kid. Why are you all so afraid of him? We control the whole family. There's nothing he can do to stop us." "What do you know? How much do you know about Harry's business? Do you know what he's building?" another council member shouted. "He just wants to sell mobile phones and appliances, cars, and so on. What is there to worry about?" the council member asked. "That's because you only see the surface. You don't see between the lines. Harry is not an ordinary businessman. He's making things that can change the power dynamic of the whole world." "Is it that serious?" The council member who questioned was unconvinced. Although he was hostile towards Harry, he was different from the other council members. This council member purely didn't want Harry to return and divide their power even further. He didn't see Harry as much of a threat. He was a young and ambitious kid, but that didn't mean he was a threat. The Parker family was large and there wasn't anything anyone could do against them. The other 3 council members could see his potential. Had Harry been raised by his parents and they hadn't been murdered, his success would have been the family's success. However, Harry wasn't welcomed by the council. In this way, Harry's success was a direct threat to the council's power. "That steward is incapable of accomplishing anything and can't even handle matters properly. How should we deal with Harry next?" a council member asked. "What's there to discuss about this? Any order from us and he'll be dealt with." The council member who spoke was arrogant. He could just wave his hand and bring the full might of the family down on whatever he wanted. Harry wanting to resist the family council was simply a pipe dream. In front of the family council's enormous strength, Harry would be squashed like a bug. One of the council members had a solemn expression as he turned on a laser projector. Then he said, "You look down on Harry too much. Take a look at this video first." The first image displayed was Harry's guards fighting with the palace guards. In the beginning, the council member who looked down on Harry didn't see the importance of seeing this scuffle. He didn't see the point in looking at Harry and his men. They weren't as strong as the palace guards. However, as the video continued to play, the bionic human began to attack the palace guards. The council member who looked down on Harry no longer had the same disdainful expression as before. Then, sweat began to form on his forehead. Who are these people? This council member didn't know that Harry had built some bionic humans. The council member who played the video sneered and said, "What you saw just now was only the tip of the iceberg. The real scary part is still at the end." As he said that, he pressed the control button a few times and played another video. The councilman jumped in fright. This video was recorded by the spy that the council had sent to watch Harry. The video showed Harry's super factory under construction. The spy had to take extra precautions because Harry knew he had spies among his people. However, identifying these spies was a meticulous task, and it would take a long time to weed them all out. Currently, Harry had yet to completely fall out with his family. If he wanted to catch all of these spies in one fell swoop, it would alert the family council. Therefore, Harry let these spies go and didn't intend to catch them for the time being. In the video, the entire super factory's vast workshop was filled with automated mechanical arms. The lines were filled with parts of the bionic humans. The raw materials were continuously poured in and then assembled. Bone-shaped armor that flickered with a cold metallic luster gradually took shape. Then, the final procedure covered the mechanical body with a silicone skin that looked like the real thing. Then the robot walked out of the production line. What made the directors even more frightened was that it wasn't just one bionic human, but hundreds one after the other. Then, they formed a square formation, and with the sound of orderly footsteps, they walked into an underground facility. The video ended here. This spy hiding in Harry's territory was obviously not qualified to enter the underground facility. However, what the spy had gathered was enough. After the four counselors finished watching the video, they were so shocked that their bodies trembled slightly, and they didn't speak for a long time. It was only when the council member who had played the video first spoke that the silence was broken. With this as proof, everyone will understand why we can't sit by and let Harry do what he wants. The information that leaked out from the video was too much for them to sit idly by. Originally, the other directors were only jealous of the futuristic technology that he possessed. They were worried that this was just the beginning. Harry was building an army and upgrading them slowly every day. If the council waited, it might be too late for them to stop Harry. In order to consolidate their power, they had to obtain something that others didn't. The technology in Harry's hands was key to keeping their positions on the council intact. What was unexpected was that Harry had already begun to put them into use. Seeing the bionic humans coming off the production line had shown that Harry had technology beyond their wildest dreams. The people of the family council naturally thought that Harry was accumulating his strength. When he reached a certain extent, he would definitely declare war on them. Overturning the family council was well within the realm of possibility, and Harry could take over the family easily. Immediately, they felt a chill run down their spines when they saw Harry's current strength, as well as the scene of Harry's endless machines surging toward them in the near future. The few council members looked at each other, but didn't say anything. However, after exchanging glances with each other, they quickly reached a consensus. We need to get rid of Harry as fast as possible. I agree with that, but how should we do it? Harry is a direct heir. We can't do it without an excuse. Harry has rejected our marriage proposal. This is a violation of the family's order. But that isn't enough to have him killed. The council members proposed different opinions on how to deal with Harry, although people with discerning eyes could see that Harry had actually been expelled from the family. If you want me to say, let's not make a move first. After all, we don't know how much he has hidden on his island. We should use someone else to see how strong he really is. Who can we use? Said the skinny one. It just so happens that there's someone just strong enough, the Prince of Saudi Arabia. That's right. If we let the Prince of Saudi Arabia get rid of Harry, then there won't be any problem, said another councilman. The key is that no one will say anything to us and no one will doubt us. It's not bad to let the Prince of Saudi Arabia test Harry's strength. But have you guys ever thought that if Harry is not as strong as he appears to be, he would be defeated by the Prince of Saudi Arabia? Wouldn't that just make the prince our new problem because he'd steal the technology from Harry? A member of the council questioned this. This is a problem, but it's not important. When the directors heard this, they immediately smiled in tacit understanding. While they were discussing Harry and Michaela had already boarded the plane and were on their way back to Florida. Looking at the snow mountain that was gradually disappearing, Harry retracted his gaze. "I'm sorry," Michaela suddenly said. "What are you sorry about?" Harry asked. "It was all my fault that you had a falling out with the family council. Otherwise, this wouldn't have happened," Michaela said with some sadness. She knew that the family land was where Harry grew up, but because Harry had a falling out with the family council, he probably couldn't go back anymore. Harry smiled and touched Michaela's head. He said, "I'm a little sad. After all, that's the place where I grew up. I'm really reluctant to leave just like that." "Why do you think they have to make things difficult for us?" Michaela said angrily. Harry shook his head. "This is not a matter of personal grudges. They only do things based on benefits. They don't care about human feelings, so don't feel like you've done anything wrong. This is all because of me. It has nothing to do with you." "They're going to come after you. They won't let you just humiliate them, right?" Michaela said worriedly. Harry nodded and said, "That's for sure, but it is hard to tell what kind of method they will use. When you go back, you will still live the same life as before. As for other aspects, I'll be there." "Okay," Michaela lightly replied and didn't say anything else. She could only rely on Harry for safety, but she couldn't give Harry the slightest bit of help. She secretly decided that she must grow up as soon as possible and become an assistant to her brother. In the past, when he was homeless and depended on the streets to survive and picked up trash, Harry didn't fantasize about letting others help him. Now that Harry had grown up, he didn't need the help of others. He could handle all his challenges by himself. After flying all the way back to Florida, the plane landed on Allen Island. June was waiting outside. When she saw Harry coming down, she went forward to welcome him. "Did everything go smoothly when you went to see the family?" June asked with concern. However, when she saw Nate following behind Harry and smiling bitterly, June understood. As Harry's old housekeeper, Nate had always been helping Harry with the family. However, now that he had followed him back, it went without saying what had happened. Harry shook his head at June and said, "The council is unreasonable. I can't get along with them." June comforted him. "If you can't get along, then let's not talk about it. Let's close the door and live our own lives. We'll not bother about the matters of the council anymore." Harry smiled and said, "I'm afraid that they won't be willing to be so kind. The council has been coveting what I've built. I'm afraid they've been waiting to attack me for a long time." June's originally gentle eyes immediately became sharp. "They dare. If the family council dares to make a move on you, I'll make sure that they don't come back." Harry quickly waved his hand. "It hasn't even started yet, and you're already picking a fight and thinking about killing, but we should be prepared for any contingencies." June said, "That's not a problem. I've upgraded the defenses around the island." In Harry's current super factory, the machine was continuously producing various kinds of bionic humans. Harry had been building the bionic humans, but could only produce enough to defend the islands. If Harry wanted to plan a large-scale attack, he'd need more bionic humans. Any plan now would require him to take them away from defending his islands, which were unacceptable. Reflecting Moon Island was the source of Harry's resources, and Allen Island was the place where Harry lived. Industrial Island was the support of Harry's wealth, and also the guarantee of his strength. If he lost control of any of them, Harry would be ruined. Of course, Harry could have a small group of bionic humans work as special forces. However, this might be useful against smaller targets. Against the Parker family, they wouldn't be able to do any meaningful damage. Harry wasn't naive enough to rely on a small branch of bionic human to overthrow the family council's rule. There was also the Wolf Guard. Similarly, Harry was grateful that the Wolf Guard chose to follow him when he was at his weakest, protecting him and helping him grow. With the bionic human, there was no need for the Wolf Guard to carry out those dangerous missions anymore. This was because Harry sympathized with his subordinates. He couldn't bear to see them suffer. After getting off the plane, Harry didn't even prepare to return to the manor to rest, so he said to June, "Let's go to Industrial Island together." If he wanted to rest, Harry would have rested on the plane. Now, due to the pressure from the family council, Harry also wanted to go to Industrial Island to take a look and see his bionic humans in production. He knew what to do. "Sounds good to me." June naturally followed Harry. "Michaela, follow Nate back to the manor," Harry said to Michaela. Michaela knew that Harry had something important to do, so she didn't want to disturb him too much. She nodded and followed Nate to the manor. In the super factory on Industrial Island, the entire factory was divided into two parts. One was used to produce bionic humans, and the other was used to produce more domestic products. The two areas didn't interfere with each other. Many workers in the civilian area didn't even know that their boss's factory also produced bionic humans. Harry came to the bionic human manufacturing center of the super factory and happened to meet Callie, who was working there. As the person in charge of the bionic human project, Callie needed to go to the Technology Development Research Institute and the factory often. Fortunately, the distance between the two sides wasn't too far. It was very convenient for her to go back and forth. "Callie, you're here. It just so happens that I need to ask you something." Harry greeted her. Callie quickly recorded a few lines of data on a table before she looked up and asked, "What do you need?" Harry briefly explained the challenges that he might encounter in the future. He then asked, "The number of bionic humans is still insufficient, but the enemy forces will not give us any time to develop. So I want to ask, can we speed up the manufacturing process?" Callie nodded and said, "Yes, but what?" "It's still the same old problem. We don't have enough funds, so we need to increase the production speed. We only need to build more of the production line, and we need to buy a large number of raw materials. Considering that there might be inefficiency, we need more raw materials and spare parts for maintenance and replacement." Callie casually wrote down a few sets of data for Harry. Harry saw the amount of funds needed and turned to ask June, "How much funds do we have now?" June replied, "Besides the emergency funds of other industries that cannot be used, the total amount of funds we can use is 30 billion. Harry frowned. "So little?" "That's not enough," Callie nodded. According to her calculations, with the current production speed of the bionic human, if the current foundation was doubled, the required funds would be 150 billion. Even if it was only a 10% increase in production capacity, the required funds would be close to 50 billion. The higher the production capacity, the less capital is needed. This was because the larger the scale of industrialization, the less cost each product would have. Harry felt helpless about this. It could be said that if Harry could live a peaceful life, this money would never be spent in a few lifetimes. The problem was that Harry wanted a plain life. However, there were people who didn't want to see him do that. Harry never looked for trouble, but people seemed to be attracted to him. Callie looked at Harry, who was in a difficult position, and said, "Actually, I've wanted to talk about the funding problem for a long time, but I've not had the chance to talk to you." "How do we solve it?" Harry asked. Callie smiled. "You only pay attention to the bionic human project, but you neglected other projects. Now the domestic products have perfected the quality standards and can be put into the market." Harry was surprised and said, "Really? So fast?" He had indeed neglected the domestic products. However, he didn't expect that it would be finished quietly. "Yes, there is no problem at all. I'm confident that our domestic products should be enough to boost our funds," Callie said, full of confidence. In Harry's super factory, the domestic products didn't receive much attention from him. This didn't mean that Harry didn't care about these products. It was because Harry really didn't have the energy to care about them. For a long time, Harry had been involved in conflicts between various powers. Therefore, in Harry's heart, the most important thing at the moment was to work hard to build up his forces. No matter who wanted to fight, they would have severe consequences. However, building strength required a huge amount of money as support. Especially when it came to dealing with the family council that controlled the Parker family, it required an even greater amount of funds and resources. Therefore, Harry had no choice but to face his own financial crisis once again. If he didn't have enough money, he could only think of a new way to make more money. New domestic products were the best source of income. By relying on these high-tech products that surpassed other products, Harry would be able to obtain a steady stream of huge funds. Domestic products would earn money, and then they could invest in the bionic human project. By relying on this money, Harry would be able to do anything he wanted. However, Harry was still a little worried. "But earning money like this takes time. What I lack the most right now is time," Callie said in surprise. "You should be better at business than me." Harry looked puzzled. "Why do you say that?" Callie said helplessly. "You are the owner of the patent, and you are also the main manufacturer. As long as you give the opportunity to a regional seller to bid, many people will come to give you money." Harry slapped his forehead and was instantly speechless. He forgot that there was such a trick. As the main manufacturer and the source of sales for the products, he really didn't need to spend so much effort to sell the products himself. This was the confidence of the seller's market. Selling the license to distribute the product would net about $100 billion. However, under such circumstances, The most important thing was how Harry wanted people to know the advantage of his product. Next month, there will be a World Industry Expo in Boston. We can apply for an exhibition spot and take our products to participate. At that time, everyone will know how good our products are. June helped Harry solve his problems. Harry clapped his hands. Great, I must attend this exhibition. Harry decided to push his products out and let everyone in the world know about them. Harry was confident that his products would be a huge hit and that he could make a lot of money. While Harry was inspecting his super factory, the family council had dismissed a few of its members. The family council member, who always had a straight face and looked especially solemn and dignified, had now returned to his home. This council member was one of Harry's uncles. He had never cared much for Harry. He was jealous of his brother and how happy he was. Their father had planned to make Harry's father the next leader of the family, but never made it official. But everyone in their hearts knew that he was the heir of the family, and people acted according to this knowledge only. In order to seize power, the brothers had been fighting and scheming to take each other out. Except for Harry's father, who didn't want to compete, the other four had been fighting with each other for many years. Finally, they realized no amount of fighting would get them any advantage. They realized collectively that their energy would be better spent doing things together, rather than trying to tear each other down. Ironically, Harry's father, who gave up on the competition, became a thorn in their side. Some of the more conniving brothers acted together to kill Harry's father and try to take the power that he had accumulated in order to take over the other brothers. When they had Harry's father killed, there was chaos, and the perpetrators gained nothing. On the contrary, they had wasted resources, favors, and lost standing with a lot of business partners. Harry's father's death was in vain. The original power dynamic was left unchanged. Now, Harry had grown up. The council would have been fine with Harry wasting away the money his father had left him. They didn't need to worry about some rich kid that just jumped around from place to place doing whatever he wanted. The problem now was that Harry had been building himself up and using some new age technology that no one had seen before. This made the council anxious and convened to propose a solution. They'd need a unanimous vote because they knew one councilman wouldn't be enough. At this moment, the four of them had to play their game of politics because they were all planning to steal from Harry alone. It had been this way for a decade. The brothers were the main cause of the downfall of the Parker family with all their petty squabbles. Had they let Harry alone, he'd eventually grow strong enough to lead the family on his own. The balance of power would be broken if one of them took down Harry alone, and the friendliness between the members of the council would no longer exist. On the surface, the four main members of the council were friendly towards each other. They were discussing how to attack together, and no one could take any advantage of them. However, in private, these people had their own plans. Harry's uncle was one of them. After he returned to his residence, he immediately called for his butler. "How's Justin doing?" The butler nodded. Justin was his son and Harry's cousin. The butler knew what Jasper had been talking about. He wanted to know how his son was doing on the project he gave him. He replied, "He's doing well. He has a few products that are ready to be shipped out and others that are a little far away from scaled-up production." "Show me the details," Jasper said. "Okay," the butler replied, turned around, and went into a secret room to retrieve a stack of information. Jasper's room was originally a private study. Behind the bookshelf in this study, there was a stack of documents. There was also a secret room that was even more private than the study itself. Other than Jasper and his son, only this butler could enter. Harry's uncle was old-fashioned and liked to use paper, which prevented this information from being stolen. The butler handed the information to Jasper and said, "This is the new information that Justin had someone send over. I have already translated the encryption. You can check it yourself." Jasper nodded. The four counselors had been peaceful for many years. There hadn't been any major conflicts. However, everyone knew that this peace wouldn't last forever. Everyone was well aware that they were sending spies to steal information and gather intelligence. Harry's uncle had tried to build something that could rival the other council members. However, he hadn't been getting anywhere. The main reason was that he had no time to split himself. He still had to scheme against the other directors of the family. It was only when his son Justin was old enough that he had him trying to give him the advantage to take over the family. He secretly established a secret research institute outside and invested a large amount of funds and resources in order to research biochemical weapons. Of course, it wasn't a destructive biochemical weapon. Jasper knew the dangers of bioweapons, and if he were to use them, there was a good chance that he'd die if they were ever used. What Jasper wanted to do was actually to create a new kind of human, a superhuman. Jasper had been trying to set up a method to hack into the DNA of a person. Jasper believes the key to superhuman abilities were already in the human genome. They just need to be stimulated. After more than 10 years of research and development, there was finally a result. The previous experiments were not considered successful. Either the gene of the subject collapsed, or their body failed, or the whole mutation went out of control and became a monster that couldn't be reasoned with. Although this type of mutated monster was quite powerful, what Jasper wanted was control, not a monster. It was only until his son had joined the research team did they see any progress. In fact, it was only after he went to the secret research institute that he made new progress. The transformation was successful, along with continuous failures and re-experimentation. Recently, he had finally successfully created dozens of modified people. They were extremely powerful, but the key was that their rationality was still under control. Harry had no idea that someone in the family was trying to build an army of superhumans. The reason he didn't know that Jasper was making superhumans is because Harry believed the only way to go was with bionic humans that he was building. He knew that natural selection and slow adaptation were the only way evolution could work. Forcing animals to adapt in no time at all always leads to extinction. However, in order to increase his own strength, Jasper wanted to interfere with the natural process of evolution. This kind of behavior was clearly a violation of ethics, but Jasper didn't care. Jasper had set up his research institute in one of the poorer places in the world. It was hard to guarantee the lives of the people there. He paid the people there just enough to eat, but only if they were willing participants in their experiments. Now, there are dozens of successfully modified people. They were standing on the shoulders of countless failed and dead experiments. Jasper looked at the information in his hand. He didn't care about the number of the failed and dead experiments. He only cared about those who had successfully survived. There were 53 of them in total. Every one of them had abilities far beyond a normal human. After Justin took over the Secret Research Institute, he changed his father's methods. His father had proposed looking for the genes in a person that made them more prone to building muscle or to build more neural pathways. Justin figured that modifying the natural genome of a person could yield greater results. A portion of the gene fragments was removed from the bodies of other animals with desirable traits and then implanted into the body of the experimental subject for fusion. The cruelty of this experiment was beyond imagination. Some of the failed subjects had extremely adverse reactions to the gene therapy and would die in agony. In fact, even Jasper sometimes didn't want to see the videos and photos of the failures. For the sake of his health, he had kept clear of the darker sides of the project. He'd tackle the tougher side of reality when he became the head of the family. Without saying anything more, Jasper looked at the information in his hands and fell into deep thought. The Secret Research Institute's progress had been going well, but they had encountered a lot of problems. The experiment was partially successful, but the price was too high. Every successful test subject was only 1 out of 1,000 dead subjects. Some trials had a success rate of 1 out of 10,000. However, human life wasn't a problem for Jasper. He didn't care how many poor people died. Instead, he felt that he was ridding the world of a problem. However, the cost for each superhuman was astronomical. With all the costs of medication and research, each superhuman came out to be about $100 million. To Jasper, $100 million wasn't a problem. The problem was that he needed to have thousands or even tens of thousands of modified people to increase his strength. Only then could he completely suppress the directors of the other 3 families. And now, with such a high cost, if he wanted to create thousands or tens of thousands of modified people, he'd never be able to afford it. Tell Justin that the cost is still too high. We have to think of a way to reduce the cost. Otherwise, we won't be able to do anything with them, Jasper instructed the butler. The butler nodded. Yes, I'll go and tell him myself. After the butler left the study, Jasper took out his phone and opened the video of Harry's super factory. He looked at it seriously again and saw that the production lines were neat. Jasper showed an expression of envy and jealousy. He even muttered to himself, I need to get my hands on one of the robots. His eyes became firm. He had played the video to the other counselors. Although the spy who had recorded the video was sent by Jasper, the other 3 families had also planted spies in Harry's businesses. As time went by, these spies would sooner or later find out about Harry's bionic human secrets. For Jasper, keeping this secret wasn't that important. He wanted to remind the other families not to neglect Harry. This was their top priority. Although these directors didn't get along with each other on the surface, they were still trying their best to compete with each other. Everyone wanted to take Harry's property for themselves, but before that, they still had to face Harry together. To Jasper, no one knew better than him how terrifying Harry's potential was. Jasper himself had invested a huge amount of funds and resources. He had spent more than 10 years developing a way to make superhumans. He had been crushed by Harry's bionic human. Between the bionic human and the modified person, they were just as strong as each other. But Jasper's superhumans cost way too much. There was no way to mass-produce them, at least not now. As for the bionic human on Harry's side, it had already been put into mass production. As long as the funds and resources were sufficient, he could ask for as much as he wanted. Another thing Jasper envied was that Harry's bionic human was absolutely loyal. Machines ran on programming. They lacked the free will that the superhumans had, which made them capable of deserting or turning on Jasper. Jasper had used their family as leverage and made it hard for the superhumans to do anything to betray him. However, nothing was impossible. It wasn't impossible for them to choose to betray their family members, even if they didn't want to. At the very least, Jasper had never had the concept of family in his heart. Everything was a fight for power. As long as he could sit as the leader of the family, he could sacrifice anyone, including his son. He couldn't believe that others would be tied down by family. Just as Jasper was thinking about how to take Harry's fortune by himself, Harry was applying for the qualification to participate in the Industrial Exposition. Then, he would prepare the products that he needed to participate in the exhibition. Harry's super factory didn't just make one thing. Instead, it covered almost all household appliances and personal cars. There were even plans for building buses for public transportation. But now, Harry didn't intend to develop a public transport system. Although Harry had a competitive advantage over other products like city public transport, it wasn't something that could make him enough money in the short term without good enough reason. Therefore, it was easier to focus on creating domestic products. As for those large-scale products, it wasn't like they wouldn't do it in the future. However, Harry wasn't prepared to sell them himself. He would find a suitable agent and use their connections, as well as the sales network. This way, Harry would be able to save a lot of trouble. Although the profits might be distributed compared to the alternatives, he was happy with that path of action. Of course, what Harry was doing now was going to the Industrial Exposition, putting his products in front of the world and attracting suitable buyers. Harry counted the goods he could use to show off. First, it was an intelligent electric car. It was equipped with a super battery and a secondary artificial intelligence terminal. It boasted superior horsepower and could run for 500 miles without needing to charge. The models varied from small to large, with 3 of those models available with the off-road package, as well as light trucks and pickup trucks. This was one of Harry's current main products, as well as a mobile phone. It also had a super battery and an AI computer. Harry's new mobile phone could outclass anything on the market. Harry had planned to release the phone soon, so he had his people contact multiple software and hardware companies to make sure that his phone would be compatible with most devices and programs. Apart from cars and phones, there were also drones. The drone was top of the line and had many applications, and with the AI, it made complex movements easier than riding a bike. Other than these 3 main products, there were also some other household electronic products. Harry wanted to create a smart house. All electronic products could be connected online and remotely controlled from the owner's phone. Harry had finally seized the opportunity and used his technological advantage to surpass everyone else in the market. After discussing with Callie about the various items for the exhibition, Harry returned to his own manor. There was still a month's time before the exhibition. However, Harry could take charge of the general direction of their show. The rest would be left to his own staff to handle. A month's time passed very quickly. During this period of time, there was no movement from the family council. Nate was chased out of the valley. Harry had lost the channel to the valley, so he could not figure out what the council was doing. He only knew what was going on was bad news. They didn't expect that it had already been a month. Since the imagined violent waves hadn't arrived, Harry couldn't be bothered to pay attention to what the council was thinking. He still had things to do. The Industrial Exposition had not started yet. On the other hand, it was time for Michaela to start school. Michaela applied to the university in Florida, which was one of the best universities in the United States. Moreover, this university wasn't small. They had multiple campuses around the state. Michaela's major was on the main campus, So on the day of the registration, Harry was prepared to personally send his sister to school. Early in the morning, Michaela helplessly watched Harry busy preparing things for her. "Harry, you don't need to prepare so much. I don't need all of this." Michaela saw that Harry had filled up the entire room with big and small bags. "I told you to stay at home, but you didn't want to. You insisted on staying at school. Of course, I have to make sure you're comfortable," Harry said. Generally speaking, university freshmen were not allowed to stay outside the school when they were in their first year. Of course, with Harry, if he insisted on letting Michaela stay at home, the school wouldn't dare to say anything. After all, Oceanside University wasn't very far from Harry's manor. Her commute by sea wouldn't take much time at all. If they found it too slow, they could take a helicopter to school just like Kiki and Juniper. But Michaela didn't want to be so privileged. She still wanted to experience a normal college life. If she didn't live on campus, she wouldn't get the same experience. Harry couldn't convince her, so he did his best to help her out. Although he was also worried that Michaela might encounter some danger if she stayed on campus. After all, the family council was eyeing Harry covetously, so he had to be on guard. Fortunately, this was Harry's territory. He was confident that he could protect his sister. After school started, Michaela had to prepare to be in the sun all day. Harry knew that physical work was very unfriendly to girls. Hard work was one thing. After all, the purpose of making college life hard at first was to let the new students have a taste of hard work and cherish their current comfortable life. The main reason was that Harry didn't want his sister to be sunburned. He got people to buy all kinds of expensive sunscreen in advance and stuffed them all into Michaela's suitcase. "This is too much. I really can't use it all by myself," Michaela chuckled. There wasn't much room in her bag for anything else. Harry said seriously, "You can give the ones you don't use to the people you want to be friends with. It's a great icebreaker." Michaela thought it was a good idea. After the two of them had made some preparations, they went out. Harry saw that the helicopter and luxury car had been prepared. Michaela advised again, "This is still a lot, Harry. Can't we just take a normal car?" She was used to the inconspicuous life in the past. Harry had a different way of doing things. If she entered the school like this, then she would become famous on the first day of school. Harry was conflicted and said, "Then what should we do? This is the worst car I have. Doesn't Holly have a car? Let's borrow hers." Michaela thought about it and suggested. As the tutor hired by Harry, Holly stayed at the manor because it was quicker than having her take a boat or fly over. However, she didn't have to stay in the manor all day. When she was free, she had her own life and liked to go out with her friends. Holly's car was nothing fancy. It was just something she used to go from point A to B. The way Holly grew up, of course, she wouldn't be able to afford such a car. Harry gave it to her as a gift. However, when Harry wanted to give her a better car, Holly didn't accept it. She took the car worth less because she didn't see the need to drive anything too fancy. Michaela had no choice. If she wanted to keep a low profile, she could only choose this car. Harry didn't have any other car that wouldn't attract attention. "Holly, you're not going out today, right?" Michaela asked Holly, who had been quietly standing at the side. Holly waved her hand. "I'm not going out today. You can use my car." Michaela happily said to Harry, "We'll borrow Holly's car and I'm going to leave most of this stuff here. I don't want any of your fancy cars to follow us." Harry scratched his head and said, "But these are all things that I have prepared for you. It'd be a pity if you don't bring them with you." "Hey, it's not like I won't come back. I'll leave them at home for now. They'll be useful in the future." Michaela urged Harry and rearranged her luggage. She left most of the luggage, taking only the necessities that she usually needed. The two of them could finally set off. There was no need for the convoy anymore. Harry personally drove the car with his sister. He took his own boat to the port of Florida and then drove the car from the boat to Oceanside University. Moving from the ocean to land would naturally be a little troublesome. If he used a helicopter to fly in the air, of course, it would be swift. But Michaela was worried that it would attract too much attention. After driving along the highway around the city for more than half an hour from the port, they finally arrived at the entrance of Oceanside University. Because it was the start of the semester, the school was open to everyone. All parents who came to send their children to school could drive their cars inside the school. Harry drove his car in, followed by a few inconspicuous cars. These were his bodyguards. No matter how Michaela wanted to keep a low profile, there would be guards following her. However, the wolf guard that followed them were all professionals. Nobody at the school could tell they were guarding Michaela and Harry. After entering the campus gate, there was a straight and wide tree-lined road. There were tall trees on both sides of the road, and in the middle of the road were all kinds of banners to welcome the new students. This reminded Harry of the time when he had just entered university. Now that a few years had passed, he felt a little nostalgic. He followed the road to the corner and saw all sorts of places to receive new students. Michaela was in the marine biology department. Harry drove while searching for a sign and quickly found it. "I'll go get in line. You go and find a parking place," Michaela suggested. Harry nodded in agreement. There were too many people at the registration area. They couldn't park the car close by. Michaela brought the admission notice and personal documents, then got out of the car and walked to the registration table. Harry turned his head and saw a parking lot not far away, so he drove the car over to see if he could find a spot closer to the entrance. The students welcoming the new students in this university were all second-year and third-year students, so welcoming the new students was something that they were rather excited about. A lot of them were from the sororities and fraternities, using this opportunity to recruit new members. Another reason was that every year when they welcomed new students, they would see new faces. When Harry's car drove into the campus, the eyes of those who were welcoming the new students lit up. The students knew that the car Harry was driving was worth a lot, and some of them recognized the brand of the car. When Michaela got out of the car, the group of boys instantly felt as if they had been struck by Cupid's arrow. They were starstruck as they watched Michaela walk over. Every department's table was filled with hopes that Michaela would report to them. But in the end, the one she ended up at was the marine biology department. The boys were annoyed that they wouldn't be having any classes with Michaela. "I should have gone into marine biology. They've got way more girls in their classes," a boy lamented. "We don't accept ugly boys like you," one of the older girls retorted. Michaela had always been silent and didn't say anything about the boys. Only at this time did she realize that the marine biology department had a majority of girls in line and at the desk. And in the other departments, most of them reported that there were more boys and fewer girls. However, this kind of comparison between men and women was meaningless. Everyone was on the same campus. Michaela, on the other hand, wasn't interested in any of the love-struck boys. She only wanted to learn, so she could help Harry run his businesses. She didn't want Harry to support his family alone and face the pressure of the family council. Although Harry didn't say it, Michaela felt that she could feel that Harry wasn't doing too well. Harry found an empty spot and parked the car, then walked towards Michaela. He had just walked a few steps before he heard his name. "Harry!" He turned around and saw a girl waving at him from afar. She looked quite excited. Harry looked confused. This girl looked familiar, but he couldn't remember who she was. When he saw the parents following behind the girl, Harry finally recognized her. "Hannah," he thought. Harry noticed that she looked different from the last time he saw her. In the past, she was a little healthy, but now Hannah was like a deflated ball. She had lost a lot of weight, but she was still chubby. "Hannah, I almost didn't recognize you." Harry greeted her with a smile. Hannah skipped all the way to Harry. She looked around and asked, "Harry, you're here with Michaela, right? Where is she?" "She's at the marine biology department table. I was just parking the car." Harry smiled. Hannah's parents carried bags and followed Hannah while panting. "Child, why are you running so fast?" After she finished speaking, she had a respectful appearance as she looked at Harry with a fawning expression and said, "Harry, good to see you." "Good to see you too," Harry said politely. They were trying to be respectful to Harry because he was the only reason Hannah was able to attend this university. The old couple was so excited that they cried. They even held a big banquet and invited their relatives and friends over to show off. Harry was still puzzled. He didn't think it was possible to lose so much weight in just a couple of months. Even the best diet medicine didn't work that well. Harry didn't believe that she started dieting and exercising. He knew she liked eating too much. Letting her exercise on a diet was no different from killing her. He asked again, "You lost weight? You look like a completely different person." Hannah was embarrassed and said, "Yes, mostly by accident." Her mother spoke up. "She was just sitting at home and ate everything in the house. She ate so much that we had to take her to the hospital, and they had her on a rather extreme diet and medication that lowered her weight." Harry was speechless. Hannah was very embarrassed and bashful. "Mom and Dad," she said shyly, "can you not talk about it, please?" Harry smiled and said, "Michaela is going to have a lot of questions when she sees you." Sure enough, when he brought Hannah and her family to find Michaela, the moment she saw Hannah, Michaela covered her mouth. "Hannah, what's wrong with you? I never heard you lost weight." Throughout the entire summer vacation, Michaela had texted Hannah many times, but Hannah had kept her hospital visit a secret. She didn't want Michaela to worry about her. Until now, Hannah had no choice but to tell her what happened. The two of them laughed and joked around, causing the students beside them to look over. The girls who were queuing with her at the front of the line unconsciously took a few steps away from Michaela. They saw how beautiful she was, and they felt inferior. Michaela had attracted a lot of attention and made even some of the older girls jealous. They liked being the center of attention. Now that Michaela had become the main focus, these girls were very dissatisfied. When it was Michaela's turn to register, the attitude of the girl in charge of the recruitment information was a little cold. However, this kind of cold attitude quickly turned into enthusiasm. This expression changed even faster when Harry walked over. The boys were all looking at Michaela, so the girls were naturally attracted to Harry. At first, these girls thought that Harry was Michaela's boyfriend, so they couldn't help but feel jealous. But after Michaela mentioned Harry as her brother, they saw the family resemblance. They immediately became excited again. Michaela covered her mouth and laughed secretly when she heard the girls gossiping about Harry. "Sounds like they like you. Go talk to them." Harry smiled bitterly and said, "No, there are enough fangirls at home and they already give me a headache." "You're not getting any younger," Michaela joked. "Come on, sign the forms. You're holding up the line." After Michaela signed everything, they handed her a key and she went with Harry to her dorm. It wasn't a coincidence that Hannah would also be in the same dorm. Harry had arranged that months prior. Harry basked in the light and entered the girls' dormitory for the first time. Originally, Harry wanted to get Michaela settled and wish her well with a nice dinner afterward. He was looking forward to their quiet evening. Instead, he was met with anxiety. The moment Harry entered the girls' dormitory, it caused a series of screams. The freshmen who had just entered the school went crazy when they saw such a handsome man. If not for their parents being in front of them, Harry wouldn't be able to leave peacefully today. With an embarrassed look on his face, Harry went to his sister's dormitory. The dormitory wasn't large and it could accommodate a total of 4 girls. There were 2 bathrooms, 2 closets, and 2 wardrobes placed in front of the door for the 4 girls to use. There were also some personal items strewn about the rooms. The beds were bunk-style beds with the bed on top and a desk underneath. The living room had an open balcony, and there was a washing machine in the corner. When Harry and Hannah's family entered, there were already people in the dormitory. The other 2 girls and their parents had arrived earlier than Harry and the rest. After Harry entered, the people inside greeted him politely. However, what surprised Harry was that the parents on both sides seemed to have some grudges against each other. One family was dressed more formally. The other family was dressed more casually and looked like their clothes were worn in. When they saw Harry and the others, they greeted them out of courtesy, but their expressions were a little stiff. Then both sides stopped talking. The formally dressed family didn't even want to get near the other family. Harry understood what was going on. The rich family seemed to be a little more protective of their daughter. They didn't want her getting mixed up with some poor girl that might not have the right values. Harry thought he could help mull things over with his own experiences, but he didn't know anything about these people, so he let it slide. He minded his own business and arranged Michaela's bed with Hannah's family. Hannah's family wasn't stupid. They could see that the 2 groups of parents who came in earlier were not on good terms with each other. They didn't say much. After greeting each other politely, they helped Harry arrange things for Michaela and Hannah. Although Harry wanted to help his sister, he hadn't done this kind of chore for a long time. Usually it was June who arranged things for him. He wasn't much help setting everything up. Fortunately, Hannah's mother was able to see things, so she took the initiative to help Harry. Harry put his sister's suitcase into the cupboard. Just as he stood up, he saw the parent who was wearing good clothes come up to him. "Can I discuss something with you?" "Sure, what's up?" Harry casually replied. "Can we swap your sister's bed with my daughter's?" Harry frowned. "What's wrong? Aren't the beds the same?" Michaela's bed was next to Hannah's bed, and the opposite bed belonged to the other 2 families. However, this man who was dressed well obviously didn't want his daughter to be with the poor family. Harry didn't think that his sister would meet such a family that disliked the poor and loved the rich. He was wondering if he should tell this school to change this family to another dormitory. In the end, this man actually took the initiative to come to Harry and make a request. Before Harry could say anything, Hannah interrupted. "No, we're together. We won't be swapping." The man didn't mind and said, "Everything is negotiable. Look, I'm not asking out of the goodness of my heart. $10,000. I'll give you cash. How about it? Harry sneered and said, "Are you very rich?" The man said proudly, "I get by. I'm the manager of the sales department of Angelic Trading Company. The company is based here in Florida. When your children graduate in the future, you can use me as a reference." Harry thought that the offer would be tempting to most people. $10,000 wasn't a small sum. It was worth it to change to another bed in the same dorm. Plus, the reference to a good-paying job on graduation was a nice bonus. The job market was only getting worse, and having that little safety net would be a huge weight off of a normal parent's mind. However, this kind of thing wouldn't work well with Harry. Harry had never heard of the company before. It was probably just an ordinary company. "Although I'm not super rich, I don't lack money. If you think 10,000 is not enough, then I'll add another 10,000. This man saw that Harry didn't speak and thought that it was because he wasn't offering enough. Offering 20,000 to exchange for a bed with his sister was an insult to Harry. Harry chuckled and shook his head. "What a coincidence. I don't lack money either." "Really? $20,000? I have cash with me," the man asked unwillingly. Harry continued to shake his head. "No deal, no matter how much you offer." While rejecting him, he was thinking about whether he should ask the school to change this family's dormitory right now. The man looked at Harry with determination. He knew that there was no way to negotiate with him, so he could only look at Hannah's family. However, Hannah's attitude was the same. "Don't look at me. I won't take the deal. This isn't about money." The man's daughter had been sitting at the side and was not saying anything. Now, she was unhappy. She held her father's hand and said unhappily, "Dad, since they don't want to change, then you can just ask the school. I don't want to be next to her. She stinks." She looked at the girl who was wearing old clothes. As for this girl, she seemed to be a bit introverted. She hadn't spoken since Harry and the others came in. At this time, she couldn't help but stand up and point at the girl. "Who are you calling stinky? You're the stinky one. Your whole family is stinky." When she stood up, Harry was surprised to find that this girl seemed to be very tall. When she was sitting, he didn't notice that when she stood up, she was very eye-catching. Michaela was taller than most girls. However, this girl was a head taller than Michaela. Harry was surprised by this girl's height and didn't say anything for a long time. Hannah and Michaela, on the other hand, exclaimed in unison, "So tall!" At this moment, she stood up and glared at the arrogant father and daughter pair, causing the two of them to tremble in fear. The tall girl was very angry. It seemed like she really wanted to rush over and scream at them. However, she was stopped by her parents. Her parents were obviously honest people. They had lived in the countryside for their entire lives. They didn't like to pretend and were afraid of getting into trouble. Now that they had sent their daughter to school in a big city, they didn't feel like they belonged. They didn't want to start any fights with the other parents. However, although they held back their anger, it still showed on their faces. When the father and daughter saw that they were only angry but didn't dare to do anything to them, they began to get defensive. "Don't be so shameless. I'll say it here today. You can forget about living in this dormitory," the rich father shouted. After saying that, he took out his phone and made a call. "Hello, yes, it's me. I've got a problem at my daughter's dorm. Can you come over for a moment?" After making the call, he became even more arrogant. "Just wait. I have a very good relationship with the school's leaders. When they come, I'll chase you out of the college." Although the family from the countryside was furious, they felt helpless. Their family had only come from a small town. If they wanted to fight for their daughter to be here, they'd have to fight hard. Michaela saw this and quietly pulled Harry's sleeve and said in a low voice, "Harry, can you help them? I don't like that family." Harry smiled and said, "Sure, let's see who they called when they show up." Not long after, a bald, middle-aged man with a big belly walked into the dormitory. "What do you want? I'm very busy today." After coming in, he said unhappily, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'll treat you to a nice dinner tonight as a thank you." "No need. School has just started today. There are too many things to do. I really don't have time." The bald man regretfully refused. He knew that since this family was rich, the dinner would be wildly expensive. Although the bald man was the leader of this school, his income wasn't considered high. He normally wouldn't be able to afford to live a luxurious life. "If you have something to say, hurry up and say it." After rejecting the offer, he urged. The dormitory area wasn't large, and there were so many people inside. The bald man thought that it was a small matter, but he didn't expect it to be such a trivial matter. His face showed some impatience. However, he also thought that this was, after all, a good opportunity to get favors from a rich man. The rich father explained the issue. The bald man chuckled and said, "This isn't a problem at all." After saying that, he pulled out the dormitory file from his phone and prepared to kick out the poor family. However, Harry stood up. "Wait, I don't agree." The bald man frowned and said, "Why should I care about what you don't agree to?" He raised his head and looked at Harry. However, he only glanced at Harry once. The bald man's eyes instantly widened, and cold sweat instantly broke out on his forehead. "Mr. Parker." As the management of the school, although his rank wasn't too high, he knew that there was a substantial donation given to the college this year from a very generous investor. Harry's influence in Florida was too great. Even if he was just a small manager of the school, he had heard of Harry's name before. It seemed like Harry's younger sister also lived in this dormitory, although he didn't understand why Harry, who was so rich, would let his sister stay in an ordinary dormitory. The school offered studio apartments as dorms that were made to house one person. The bald man didn't know that Harry originally didn't want Michaela to live at the school either. The bald man was numb. He didn't know if this friend of his had offended Harry just now. However, at this time, regardless of whether his friend offended Harry or not, the bald man didn't want to make the situation any worse than it was. "Mr. Parker, I didn't know you were here as well," Harry said with an expressionless face. "Since you know me, it'll be easy. I don't like this family and I don't want this girl to live with my sister. Send them to a different dorm." The bald man nodded his head without hesitation. "Yes, I'll set something up for them right away." After saying that, he straightened his back and said to the rich father, "Did you hear that? Mr. Parker doesn't like you. Quickly pack your luggage and get out." The rich father and daughter were both dumbfounded. They didn't expect things to turn around like this. They didn't know who Harry was, but they understood that Harry had a lot of power and influence. They didn't want to make things any worse for themselves. Harry stood on the side. He didn't say anything else for the time being. However, his lazy look gave people a sense of mystery and oppression. The bald man was sweating profusely as he urged the father and daughter to leave. After knowing that Harry wasn't someone to be trifled with, they didn't dare to say another word. They hurriedly packed their luggage and left with their tails between their legs. When they left the dormitory, the bald man wiped the sweat off his forehead and respectfully asked Harry, "Mr. Parker, do you have any other orders?" Harry didn't comment. "Not for now. Go back to your work, thank you." "Okay, if you need anything, just let me know." After saying that, the bald man left the dormitory as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. After he walked out of the door, his legs went soft. Just now, Harry had been too hard on him. The bald man was worried. If he didn't deal with it well today, he would anger Harry. Then he would lose his job at the school. The best job he could hope for afterward was of a janitor. Harry had a lot of power in the state. What he says, goes. Everyone heard about his scuffle with the Hugh family and how poorly that went for them. Harry had set a precedent for anyone else that came to Florida. "Wow, Harry, you're really amazing. You can solve the problem with just a word," Hannah exclaimed in excitement. She knew that Harry was very powerful, but she had never experienced such a level of power except for the fact that Harry had saved her once. Today, she experienced it once more. It was even more satisfying than the last time. The main reason was that teaching those little hoodlums a lesson didn't give them any sense of accomplishment, but teaching these self-righteous rich people a lesson, it gave people a different kind of happiness. With just a casual glance, the matter was resolved. The taller girl's expression changed when she looked at Harry. She didn't expect someone like him would be in her dorm. Harry squatted down. "Hello, thank you for your help just now." The tall girl didn't know how to speak. When she faced Harry, she was choked up. She usually had a sharp tongue, but now she felt sheepish. Harry waved his hand. "It's nothing. My sister is living here. I don't want her to have to deal with those kinds of people." "I still have to thank you. After all, you helped me." The tall girl saw that Harry's tone became gentle, and the pressure in her heart lessened a little. Then a smile returned to her face. "My family made some snacks for me. You can have some if you want." As she spoke, she took out a large pile of dried fruits and other food from her bulging luggage. Before Michaela could say anything, Hannah's eyes lit up. She ran over without hesitation. "Hey, there are walnuts and chestnuts. Don't mind if I taste some." After saying that, she took the walnuts without any hesitation. She didn't acknowledge strangers at all. Harry already knew Hannah was like this, so he didn't mind. He smiled and invited everyone to sit down to ease the tense atmosphere. Now, everyone was really relaxed. When the tall girl and her family saw that Harry wasn't a person who was difficult to talk to, they also felt relaxed. The three families sat together and happily chatted. When they were almost done cleaning up the dormitory, it was already noon. Harry looked at his watch and suggested, "Since everyone is going to be living together, it'd be good if we got to know each other better. Let's have lunch together at noon." When the tall girl and her family heard this, they were a little hesitant. It wasn't that they were unwilling, it was just that they were simply worried they'd get laughed at. After all, it was because their family wasn't well off. They came to such a big city, they didn't want to impose on Harry. If they went out to eat, they really wouldn't be able to afford it. However, this wasn't a problem for Harry. It was just a meal. "Don't be shy, I was like you at one point, it'll be my treat." Hannah's parents smiled politely and said, "Harry, how can you do that? You have helped us so much." The tall girl's family also waved their hands in embarrassment. "We haven't done anything to deserve this." Harry smiled and said, "I'm a rich man. You don't have to be so polite to me. It is just a meal. You won't break my bank." After saying that, he didn't allow anyone to reject him and pulled everyone out of the dormitory. In the school, besides the public cafeteria, there were also a few good dining places, but after all, it was run by the school. No matter how good it was, it wouldn't be great. Harry didn't find it troublesome. He called his subordinates over and drove a few cars out of the school with everyone. They went straight to Randy's hotel. In Florida, the best place to eat was Randy's hotel. However, the standard of a 5-star hotel was too high. Hannah's family, as well as the tall girl's family, couldn't accept it. Both of them were ordinary people. They wouldn't feel like they would be accepted in such a magnificent place. To be honest, although Randy's hotel was a 5-star hotel, it had actually been upgraded a long time ago. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was a 7-star hotel now, but he had not had the time to officially upgrade the rating yet. However, it will be soon. Harry didn't care about anything like Michelin stars. In his opinion, as long as it was edible, it would be fine. Hannah had experienced the high life before. When she was in her hometown, she would often eat and drink with Michaela. Therefore, she wasn't surprised that she came to this luxurious hotel. On the contrary, it was the tall girl. It seemed like they had never been to such a high-class place before. They didn't even know how to walk when they came in. It was as if they were afraid of dirtying the ground. Harry saw that they were very restrained, so he smiled and comforted them. "Don't be too nervous. It's just a place to eat. The reason why we came here is because the food here is delicious." "Harry, I'm not nervous at all." Hannah put her hands on her hips and said, "All right, I'll let you eat until you can't move today, but you promise you won't overdo it?" Harry asked with a smile. He remembered that Hannah had gotten sick from eating too much during her summer vacation. Hannah patted her stomach. "It's nothing, I'm totally fine now." Harry's arrival naturally alerted all the managers of the hotel. Needless to say, the best private room was reserved for Harry. It was the best view room on the top floor of the hotel. Sitting in the room allowed him to overlook the entire downtown area of Florida. After everyone took their seats, they introduced each other again. Only now did Harry know that the tall girl's name was Lizzie. Her height and body were different from most girls. She wasn't ugly. However, in front of Harry, this girl didn't want to be too forward. The restaurant sent up some of its best dishes. Harry saw that the dishes were almost ready, so he called everyone to start the meal. There was really no need to follow ethics here. In fact, Harry himself didn't have any rules, and he didn't like being restricted either. After drinking a glass of wine with the parents of the two families, everyone finally relaxed and started to talk and laugh. Harry said, "Lizzie, from now on, you and my sister will be classmates in the same dormitory. You have to take care of each other during college." Lizzie was puzzled. "I'm not much of a caretaker." In her knowledge, a person who came out of a small place like her wouldn't have the ability to take care of others in the university campus. Harry shook his head and smiled. "The problem is that my sister is too beautiful. In the future, when she is pestered by the boys in the school, you have to take care of her." Harry was most worried that his sister would be entangled with all kinds of messy boys. Harry felt protective of his family and didn't want Michaela to worry. After all, it wasn't wrong for the boys to chase girls in school. Harry couldn't protect her from everything. However, after seeing Lizzie, Harry knew that his sister had a candidate to be her bodyguard. Lizzie wasn't prepared to get into any fights. If they were really in danger, Harry's subordinates would have to deal with it. Just letting Lizzie help her sister deal with the boys in school was enough. Lizzie agreed to help out Michaela. In her opinion, Harry had really helped her a lot. She was already classmates with Michaela, so it was only right for them to help each other as they will be staying in the same dormitory. After the gathering ended, Harry sent everyone back to the campus. After all the admission procedures were completed, Michaela began her university life. Harry also returned to his own manor. He still had to prepare to attend the expo in a while, and Harry had other things to do. Michaela got in her dress and prepared to go to school. Michaela stood in front of the mirror and took a photo, sending it to Harry. Harry was instantly stunned. He didn't expect his sister to look so graceful. Harry was shocked. The whole school was in an uproar. All the boys couldn't help but stare. After 15 days of classes, it just so happened to be time for a long weekend. Michaela returned to the manor. She could go to the industrial exposition with Harry. Sitting on the plane, Michaela fiddled with the phone Harry gave her. "These products are really neat, Harry." Harry smiled. "Of course. I'm competing against massive brands. If they weren't good, why would I bother?" Michaela said, "When I was at school, many of my classmates said that they liked my stuff. They even asked me where I bought it from." This could be considered product research and development. Harry asked seriously, "Oh, they all said it was good? Is there anything you don't like?" That's not the case. This phone has a beautiful appearance and the system is also very smooth. Its configuration is much higher than others. Students all say that they are jealous of me, Michaela replied. Harry knew in his heart. Things like phones were all they seemed to care about. Since they had already liked his products, it seemed like it would be easier to promote it to the market in the future. "Harry, you can't let anyone else have the right to be the agent of your products. You have to take care of your own brother first," Randy said with a worried face. Randy and Harvey also followed him to participate in the industrial exposition. At this time, they were sitting together with Harry and finally couldn't help but speak. Harry naturally didn't have any objections. Harry had plans to let his friends keep some of the income from the products. Harry smiled and nodded. "Don't worry, you'll get your cut," Randy laughed. "I know, I'm thinking of buying a house and putting them all in there. Whether it was the mobile phone, the smartphone, or all the household appliances. However, Harry, can you give me a set of the first batch of products? I'll use it myself first." Randy rubbed his hands. Harry smiled and said, "What do you want to do with the ordinary ones? I still have custom-made ones here. Do you want them?" Randy's eyes lit up. "Yes, custom-made is usually better. Of course I want them." "Then wait for me to come back. I'll get everything ready for you." Harry's heroic spirit soared to the sky. Randy gave him a thumbs up. "Harry, you're the best." Harry said he would set up a whole collection of products, custom-made for Randy. He wasn't kidding. Because Randy would definitely get some more high-end products in his hands, and he wouldn't be the only one using them. Randy had to keep up appearances with his other friends. Although Harry's products looked like ordinary products, it was a necessity for daily life. It was precisely because of these common usages that they could be completely different. It was necessary to make some high-end products to satisfy the pretentious mentality of some super rich people. Since Randy wanted to be an agent, it wasn't enough to just rely on ordinary products. He also needed to show off the better projects so he could share them with his other rich friends and stay famous. "Harvey wants to be an agent. Why don't you be an agent for me in the South?" Harry suggested. Randy's family was in the South, so it was more convenient for him to be an agent there anyway. Harvey's family was located in the mainland, so he was the only one in this area. "All right, then I'll set up some meetings with my people and I'll get stuff figured out." Randy nodded and said. There was no need for formalities between him and Harry anymore. Since Harry had given it to him, he would accept it. Besides, it wasn't easy to act as an agent. It wasn't that they could sit and wait to earn money just because the products were awesome. They needed to think about how to start the sales of the entire region, how to advertise, and how to deal with the competition among their peers. Harry and the other two discussed their future work. Harry had to catch a flight soon to get to the expo. The expo was being held in one of the largest convention centers in the world, just outside a large oil field. The area had been working, trying to expand their influx of money because they had gotten reports that their oil would be running out in a few years. If they wanted to make money, they had to expand into new avenues of revenue if they wanted to keep growing in the area. The Council for Land Management had approved the convention center because they knew it would bring in a lot of outside investors and tourists. Therefore, they attached great importance to this industrial exposition. The merchants invited to the exhibition were all top international companies. They figured if any company was interested, they could market off their land where the interested company could build a factory. Harry had been placed in a back corner of the convention center. Harry didn't mind. He wasn't a big brand or a well-known manufacturer. He wasn't worried about getting the best spot in the expo. After the plane landed, Harry walked out and found out that all the big names had flown in. His private plane was worth a lot, but wasn't eye-catching at all in this airport. It wasn't even the best in the hangar. The one next to his had been plated gold, which had to have cost a fortune. Under the scorching sun, the golden plane shined. Randy said disdainfully, "These rich dogs have no sense of fashion. This is just about the ugliest plane I've ever seen." Harry smiled and said, "You're jealous. They're really rich." Randy said with disdain, "It's probably some rich kid playing with his dad's money." Harry shrugged his shoulders and didn't want to add to his friend's petty remarks. The exhibition site wasn't far from the airport, so it was easy to send the goods over. After all, it was an industrial exhibition. Not all of the products at the exhibition were small. A lot of the other manufacturers even came sooner and had set up their larger machines to give good demonstrations. For an exhibition of this scale, if they only brought models, others wouldn't even bother to look at them. Fortunately, Harry's side could be considered to be more relaxed. Apart from the large size of the artificial intelligent car, the rest were more convenient to transport. Harry wanted to drive his car right onto the floor of the expo. If he wanted to do that, he'd have to get a transport truck to move it. Harry arrived rather late at the expo. After setting up the booth today, the expo will officially begin the next day. Standing at his booth, he saw that the area was only about 100 square meters, and the location was still very remote. Randy was a little angry. "Harry, why'd they give us such a bad spot?" Harry said helplessly. "No one has ever heard of us. There's no reason why they would ever give us a prime spot." Harry used the name of the newly registered company to participate in the exhibition. He thought he was lucky enough to even get a spot at all in the expo. It would be impossible to get a good spot. "No, I need to talk to them. Our products are obviously the best. These people are blind." Randy wasn't convinced. He clamored and wanted to use his connections to change Harry's booth. His family had connections, and though he didn't have a whole lot in the area, he still had some pull. However, Harry still stopped him. "Forget it. Don't be a spoiled sport. The location is fine where it is," Harry said. Randy was so angry that he snorted. "But this place is so remote. How can we make our products famous?" Harry smiled and said, "The products speak for themselves. Once people see them, they'll tell others, and before you know it, this place is going to be packed." Regarding the advantage of his own product, Harry had absolute confidence in himself. He believed that even if the position wasn't good, there was no way someone couldn't make it in this big exhibition. As long as one person came, then the problem would be solved. If one could come, then two could come. In the end, his booth would definitely become the hotspot for this exhibition. Because they were here for the expo, Harry and the others didn't have time to play elsewhere. After setting up the booth, it was already nighttime. The group arrived at a famous hotel. This hotel was often called Sail Hotel because the building looked like a huge sail. The hotel was one of the most extravagant in the world. Those who could stay here were either rich or noble. Because of the exhibition, all the hotels here were full of people. Even the sailboat hotel was no exception. Fortunately, Harry had already booked a room, so he didn't have to worry about not having a place to stay. Standing in the lobby of the hotel, while waiting for the waiter to carry his luggage, Harry was looking at the renovation of the hotel. It was indeed very luxurious, but the style was kind of like the plane next to his in the hangar. Everything had to be gold. No matter where he looked, it would be glittering with golden light. "My hotel looks better than this," Randy said. Harvey smiled and said, "Don't be jealous. No matter what, this place is still a fancy hotel." Randy didn't think it was a big deal. "I really don't know who gave it a rating. It's not worth it." "Enough. Your hotel will get a better rating soon, I promise. Then you can laugh at others. Hurry up and go back to your room to rest," Harry said from the side. Randy immediately lost his excitement and lowered his head to walk honestly. Randy was like Harry in one way. His family didn't value him as highly as he thought they should. That was why he came to Florida to expand his career. Although the scale wasn't bad, Randy was still far from being a truly powerful figure. Harvey didn't have any messy internal affairs in his family. He was the only son of his father, and his father loved him. In the future, no one else in the family could inherit his business except him. However, the properties of the Livingston family were mostly in the real estate and entertainment industry. Their capital was huge, but their real strength was limited. Therefore, when they arrived at the Sand Country, no matter how arrogant Randy wanted to be, he didn't have much confidence in the territory of these big dogs. They rested for the night and went to the expo the next morning. On the day of the opening ceremony, not only did the venue hold a grand performance, but it also even invited a group of world-class celebrities to take the stage to start everything off. Royal families and tycoons from all over the world, as long as they were famous, basically all of them could be seen in the expo. However, Harry wasn't interested in this performance. He had already carefully placed the products for the exhibition in his exhibition area early in the morning. He had also prepared the printed brochures beforehand. "Harry, you've prepared so carefully. If no one paid attention to you these few days, it would be awkward." Randy had nothing better to do, so he asked. Harry smiled. "That's impossible. No matter how remote the location is, it's impossible. There will always be people passing by, and as long as there are people coming from here, I'm confident I can attract them." "You're so confident?" Randy asked. Harry nodded. "That's how confident I am." After almost an entire morning, it was almost time for lunch. There wasn't even a shadow of a passerby in Harry's booth. Randy couldn't help but wanted to say something again, but he felt that it would be more awkward to say it out loud, so he held it in and didn't say anything else. He was afraid that saying it out loud would dampen everyone's confidence and might even result in a fierce beating. Harry ordered from the hotel outside for lunch. Fortunately, Harry and the others were not too picky, so they did their best to order some dishes that were in line with the local customs. When the food was delivered, a few of them ate quietly. No one was in the mood to talk anymore. Originally, they had confidently come here to participate in the exhibition in order to make their products famous. But not even a shadow could be seen around his products. They couldn't blame Harry's products for being too poor, and they couldn't arouse the interest of others. The remote location of the booth was actually not a problem. Because the scale of the exhibition was huge and many people were invited, it attracted a lot of attention. There were even more people who came to visit because of the fame, and they treated it as a vacation. The main problem was that the scale of the exhibition was too large. In order to show off, some of the bigger investors made the exhibition venue as big as a small city, afraid that others wouldn't know that they were rich. They even paid a few of the bigger names to show up. This way, the entire exhibition wouldn't have any empty booths. It would be filled with all kinds of big and small companies. Therefore, no matter how many tourists there were, it was impossible for them to finish visiting the entire exhibition in one day's time. Basically, on the first day, everyone's attention was focused on the best stadiums of the expo. That was the venue for the top 500 companies in the world to participate in the expo, even if there were people who didn't like to watch the products of the top 500 companies. He focused his attention on small companies. He had to look at them one by one. When he saw the products he was interested in, he would stop and talk to the staff. Therefore, when they arrived at Harry's place, they wouldn't see a single person for more than half a day. "Harry, I think we should go out and give out flyers. This way, at least we can attract some people over," Randy couldn't help but suggest. However, Harry wasn't worried at all. He said calmly, "No need. Giving out leaflets is too boring. We're going to be world-class giants in the future. We need to be calm." In fact, Harry was a little worried, but he wasn't in a hurry. The top 500 manufacturing companies in the world had come to the expo this time, and there were countless small companies joining in on the fun. There were even more leaflets at the exhibition site. Even if Harry and the others did the same thing as others, they wouldn't get anybody. After all, in the eyes of others, Harry's company wasn't famous. It was similar to other small companies. No one would pay attention to this kind of unknown company. However, there were people who came to visit the exhibition. No matter how bad the location of Harry's booth was, it was still at the exhibition site. There would always be people passing by and noticing them in their booth. Sure enough, in the afternoon, people started to appear around Harry's booth one after another. In the eyes of Randy and the others who were full of anticipation, Finally, someone came to visit Harry's booth. A group of young people who looked like tourists walked over while chattering. Originally, they were just passing by, so they didn't intend to look at Harry's booth. However, a girl among the group of young people inadvertently turned her head to take a look. Then, she made a sound of surprise. "Michaela, why are you here?" the girl asked. Michaela was fiddling with her phone with her head lowered. When she heard the noise, she looked up in surprise. "Charisse, why are you here?" Both of them were surprised. Harry looked at his sister and asked, "You two know each other. Are you classmates?" Michaela nodded and said, "Yes, we're in the same department." The girl called Charisse curiously looked at Harry a few times, and then a trace of intoxication appeared in her eyes. It seemed that she was fascinated by Harry's handsomeness. "Michaela, who is this handsome guy?" Charisse asked with great interest. After saying that, she walked into the progress table and sat on the chair opposite Harry. The boys and girls who came with her saw Charisse walk in and followed her. They were all curiously sizing her up: Harry, Michaela, and the other two. As for the electronic products Harry brought, they were not interested at the moment. "This is my brother. We're here for the exhibition," Michaela replied. Charisse shouted very exaggeratedly, "Wow, this is your brother. He is really handsome." At Oceanside University, Harry only showed his face once when sending his sister to school. Since then, Harry never went there again, but none of the girls would forget his face. Very quickly, the news spread throughout the entire school. Harry didn't expect that the girls in this school would remember him until now. Charisse had heard that Michaela's brother was super handsome, but unfortunately, she'd never met Harry. Today they met by chance and found that the rumors were true. Initially, she thought that the rumors were exaggerated. Now she realized that it wasn't exaggerated at all. Instead, she had underestimated Harry's appearance. "It's just average. Why are you guys here?" Harry said modestly. Charisse was overly enthusiastic about Harry. She immediately replied, "Isn't the school on vacation? We thought we'd go somewhere fun. We heard this place was holding a big expo with a lot of food and parties." Harry nodded and sized her up again. Charisse and the others saw that they were all wearing very particular big brands. They were also wearing expensive jewelry. He knew that these people were all from rich families. Rich kids went all over the world with their parents' money. Poor kids got the bad end of the rope. They had to work throughout the school year and especially throughout the break. Usually this meant that the rich kids had grown to learn all about the world but had no real experience. The poor kids learned more about how to handle life through their hardships. Moreover, they would be able to get to know a lot of people, which would be beneficial for their future. Michaela had learned the hard way that life wasn't fair, but it was how you built your way up in the world. As a result, although she was smart, she lacked a lot of connections. It was only when Harry found her and gave her the freedom of wealth that she could get rid of those days. Although Michaela had not grown up yet, by relying on her natural intelligence, she would be able to grow up very quickly and be independent. However, compared to this Charisse, Michaela still lacked some things. Just by looking at how Charisse could be in a foreign country and be able to talk freely with everyone, it was something that Michaela couldn't compare with. Charisse was obviously very interested in Harry. She stared at Harry without blinking, as if she wanted to marry him. Harry had seen this kind of look many times, so he didn't really care about it. "Hey, handsome, I heard from my classmates that you run your own business, right? Being able to come here to participate in the expo is very impressive," Charisse praised. Harry smiled. "It's all right. I'm just here to promote the product that just came out." Charisse looked around and said, "Yes, it is just that the location is a little remote. No one is coming back here." Harry said indifferently, "It doesn't matter. 3 days is enough. We will meet customers eventually." Charisse rolled her eyes and said, "Hey, I know quite a few people. How about I help you and find some people to support you? Otherwise, your booth will always be empty." Harry shook his head and refused. "No need. Thank you for your good intentions." Michaela looked at Harry and then looked at Charisse. There was a slightly unhappy look on her face. Michaela grew jealous of Charisse and wanted her to have nothing to do with Harry. Michaela was very happy to see Harry reject Charisse's good intentions. Charisse and Michaela were in the same department. They knew each other, but they weren't friends. Charisse had been jealous of Michaela ever since she started going to the university. All the boys adored Michaela and wouldn't even look at Charisse. If Michaela wasn't at Oceanside University, Charisse would be the prettiest girl on campus. Charice's tragedy was that she went to the same university as Michaela. Charice's family also did business. Her father was the chairman of a big company. She had a good family, a rich life, and all kinds of branded clothes and jewelry. Charice acted like a princess, and all the other girls treated her like one too. Charice was jealous of Michaela. She hated that she had to compete to keep what she had wanted her whole life. When she saw that Michaela was following Harry to participate in the expo, and that Harry's wasn't full of potential buyers, she knew that Harry was a rich man, but she didn't know how he got his money. Seeing that no one cared about his products, Charice subconsciously thought that Harry's so-called business had to be pathetic. At this moment, Charice felt superior to Michaela. Actually, my family's company is also here for the exhibition. I just came from the booth, and there are quite a number of people looking around. I think it would be better to let Michaela go to my booth to give out leaflets. She'd be perfect for attracting customers, Charice said in a seemingly friendly manner. She liked Harry very much. After all, he was a handsome man. Therefore, although it seemed like she was helping Harry, she was actually secretly ridiculing Michaela. She subtly pointed out that her booth was full of people and there was no one by Harry's. Michaela understood what Charice meant, but she couldn't refute it. After all, she didn't say anything wrong. Thus, her heart was in a panic. She wanted to say something to refute it, but was unable to say anything. Charice narrowed her eyes and looked at Harry and then at Michaela. Harry patted his sister's shoulder and said with a smile, "Don't worry, look, a customer is here." As expected, while they were talking, people gradually came from afar to visit. These people were not passing by. Obviously, they were seriously looking at the products of the various booths. However, they were all visiting small enterprises. Some of the technology wasn't any better than most things on the market, and some of the products seemed a bit overpriced. The visiting enterprises were dissatisfied. Charice saw these people walking over from afar, and the corners of her mouth curled up, revealing a trace of a smile. These people looked all the way and weren't satisfied with what they saw. When they came to Harry's place, they didn't see anything that would catch their eye. After all, since Harry's booth was placed in such a remote place, it meant that his company wasn't that well known. It was no different from those who participated in the exhibition next to him. Everyone had already seen what some of the top 500 companies had to offer, and they all looked the same. "Hey, these people look very picky. They probably have nothing better to do," Charice said in a strange tone. Michaela was really angry. "How do you know they are not interested in our products? They haven't even come to take a look." Charice smiled and said, "What are you worried about? I didn't say anything about your products." Michaela choked on her words. Harry tried to persuade her. All right, Michaela. Don't argue with your classmates. The customers will be here soon. Don't be rude." Harry had brought enough employees to attend the exhibition this time. The purpose of coming with Harry to attend the expo was to let Michaela gain experience and to train her in the ways of the business. Michaela gave Charice a dissatisfied look. "We're busy here. If you have nothing else to do, you can leave." Charice sat on the chair without moving and ignored Michaela. Instead, she asked Harry, "Harry, I just walked a lot and I'm exhausted. Can I rest here for a while?" Harry didn't care about this little spat between the girls. Harry smiled and said, "It's fine. You can rest here if you want." "But Michaela thinks that I'm in the way," Charice said pitifully. Harry shook his head. "It's fine. Those chairs are there for people to rest." Michaela saw that her brother had compromised with Charice and was very unhappy. She snorted and ignored the two of them and turned around to welcome the guests. Michaela knew why Charice wouldn't leave. She had plans to ruin their booth and make sure no one buys Harry's product. The people who came to Harry's booth had blonde hair and blue eyes. They were all from the European Union's Trade and Logistics branch, and Wally and Schmidt were the leaders of the group. The main reason they came to the exhibition this time was to find some products with potential. The European Union was one of the 3 major consumer markets in the world, and the total annual expenditure accounted for 1/3 of the entire world economy. To maintain the long-term prosperity of such a super consumer market, they had to find the best new products to put into the market. This time, Wally was leading a team to tour the industrial exposition. He had seen a lot of products and wasn't very satisfied. Although there were many new products from the top 500 companies in the world, they were unoriginal. For the European Union, these new products were meaningless, and there was no need to support them. None of them were groundbreaking technologies that could change the world. After all, these big companies had long taken root in the European Union. Many of them were based in European countries. After looking at the top 500 products, Wally knew that he didn't need to pay special attention to them this time. After thinking for a while, he went to the exhibition area of other small companies. He wanted to see if there were any new products here. In the end, after walking around, he still didn't see anything good. Small enterprises were limited. In terms of research and development, they definitely couldn't compare to those big established enterprises. The products that were released this time were either outdated products or counterfeits for those big companies. After walking around for a while, Wally thought that he had come for nothing. An extremely beautiful woman. A little girl ran in front of him and greeted him. "Sir, how are you doing? If you have time, could you come and take a look at our booth?" This little girl just so happened to be Michaela. Of course, Michaela wasn't normally nervous. She was just not used to talking to strangers. After stuttering, Michaela's face turned red. After all, Harry was watching from behind. Charisse was also watching, hoping that Michaela would mess up. She greeted the man and even stuttered in front of him. When Charisse saw Michaela's embarrassed look, she felt that it was too funny. However, she still had to keep up appearances with Harry. If Harry wasn't here, Charisse would have laughed and then ridiculed Michaela in front of everyone. Hey, Michaela is helping me out. These men are very picky. Now that she can't even speak properly, I guess they are even less interested to come and see this booth. Charisse smiled and spoke to her friend that had sat with her. Seeing this, he also smiled and said, "This is really too embarrassing. I reckon she's going to drive those men away." Harry didn't care if his sister was embarrassed or not. It was the first time she had a conversation with a complete stranger. She wanted him to come and buy something from her. Harry thought it was good enough that she at least tried to get them to buy something. Therefore, when Michaela turned back to look at Harry, he gave her an encouraging look, indicating that she should continue. To Charisse's surprise, the men seemed intrigued. They looked very gentlemanly and stood in front of Michaela and started to talk to her amiably. He thought to himself, "These small companies can afford a spokesperson, can't they? Seems odd that one of the owners would let his inexperienced daughter do this kind of work. If he let the girl down, it would be rude of Wally." With his gentlemanly style, Wally gladly accepted Michaela's invitation. He extended his hand, full of aristocratic etiquette, and gestured for Michaela to guide them into the booth. Michaela saw that these originally serious people had agreed to come and visit, and she was very surprised. She turned around to look at Harry again, and Harry gave his sister a thumbs up. Charisse, on the other hand, wasn't too happy. No matter how she thought about it, she couldn't understand why these men agreed to come and visit Harry's booth. No matter what she thought, Michaela was still able to bring in these men. Originally, Wally didn't have much hope for this expo. He felt that even if he looked, he wouldn't be able to see anything good. It was just out of courtesy that he didn't reject Michaela. But after entering the booth and seeing Harry's products, Wally's eyes lit up. There were all kinds of well-made electronic products, and the designs were very artistic. It could be seen that they had been carefully designed. The appearance of the product was enough to attract people, but when Wally got his hands on some of the devices, his eyes lit up even more. A more detailed operating system, high-quality hardware, an unbelievable super battery, and good artificial intelligence. Wally felt that these were the products he had been hoping he would find at the expo. "Hello, can you tell me more about these products and your company?" Wally said excitedly. Charisse, who was secretly watching the show in the lounge area, looked like she had seen a ghost and was shocked. At this moment, a lot of people came to Harry's booth to see what he had to offer. Wally seemed to be quite famous among the people he asked to come to the booth. Of course, as the leader of the European Union's business inspection team, Wally must have a very high reputation and prestige in the business world. Now that he had developed a great interest in Harry's products, these onlookers were even more shocked. As one of the 3 major consumer markets in the world, Wally's every move would attract attention. Someone with his status should have been at the top 500 companies, which was the main exhibition floor. Basically, he wouldn't come to this unknown booth without a good reason. With Wally's unexpected move, the onlookers were immediately interested in Harry's booth. Looking inside the booth, the products that Harry displayed were just some delicate electronic products. The biggest one was just an electric car that was placed on the platform in the center of the booth. Everybody was into electronics today, and another company trying to break into the market wasn't new. 90% of the market share was owned by 3 large companies. Other similar companies could only produce some inferior imitation products or directly obtain the authorization to assemble them. However, Wally was interested in Harry's products. This was enough to show that Harry's products were something special. Those who were watching the show realized what was going on and wanted to go to Harry's booth to have a good look at his stuff. Unfortunately, Wally was inside. Those who were watching the show didn't dare to go in and disturb him. They could only patiently line up outside and wait for Wally to finish his inspection. Such a scene made Charissa's face burn. Just now, she was confidently mocking Michaela, saying that her booth wasn't good and that the products were nothing special and couldn't arouse other people's interest. Harry was naturally not surprised by this sudden crowd. As the captain of the European Union's business group, Wally was neither a fool nor a blind person. After he saw the products that Harry showed, he concluded that these products would do really well in the market. If the marketing was good, these products would subvert the current market structure in the near future. For such a competitive product, it was extremely lucky for Wally to be the first one to see it. After all, the current market was made up of technology. Anyone that could build a versatile portfolio of products could easily maintain a monopoly. It would be even more profitable than digging a gold mine. Digging gold mines required capital investment, and they also had to bear the risk of running out of gold ores. New technology was like a bottomless pit of gold. In the future, they would obtain endless benefits, and they would be able to gain the advantage of the market earlier than others. Once Wally entered Harry's booth, everyone inside was stunned except for Harry. Even Randy and Harvey were stunned for a long time. They knew that Wally was a very famous person in the business world. He had a lot of power and connections. Harry was more than capable to seize this opportunity. Harry walked towards Wally with a smile and greeted him warmly. "Mr. Wally, welcome to my booth." Wally was a little puzzled. "These are all yours?" Harry gave him a positive answer. "Yes, these are the latest my company has to offer. You can look at it to your heart's content." Wally was even happier. He originally thought that this kind of small booth would at most send a salesperson to manage, but he didn't expect the owner of the company to be here. The bigger company always had some of the executives on the floor at these expos. However, the bosses of small companies rarely appeared at the expo personally. Most companies used it as an opportunity to expand while still growing at home. It was also a great way to give their employees some experience. It was also a sense of pride to be able to present at such a large expo. Most of the smaller companies advertised saying that it was like a sign of legitimacy. If any of the owners did come, they'd be at some of the bigger booths building connections. After all, there weren't many opportunities to network with the top 500 companies. "It's great that you are the boss. I think no one is more familiar with your products than you. Can you describe them to me in detail?" Wally was very interested. Harry also extended his hand politely. "Of course, this way please." After saying that, he brought Wally to the booth of the phone. Currently, mobile phones were an essential tool for everyone. People in any place in the world, whether they were poor or rich, needed phones. After giving Wally a demonstration, Wally was amazed. He didn't expect Harry's mobile phone to be so amazing. Compared to the advertisements, Harry's phone was much better. Most people over-exaggerated what their products could do in their advertisements. However, this wasn't the case for Harry. The situation was completely reversed. Wally saw a lot of desirable aspects of Harry's phone. The battery was bigger and lasted longer than any other model. The charging time was also shortened. Harry even proved it by taking a phone with no charge, and before Wally knew it, the phone was at full charge from a standard outlet. After filling up the battery, Harry opened up an app that projected a game onto the real world, where it could scan the environment in real time and build a game off of just that data. Wally had seen advertisements for the game, but wasn't much into them himself. He knew that the game was ambitious, and only the best phones could run it without any issues. It was common knowledge that a large-scale mobile game like this required an extremely high mobile phone configuration, which also meant that it required a lot of processing power. Most phone batteries could only last an hour and a half while running the game. The game wasn't selling well because of the requirements, but this wasn't the main point. The reason why Harry wanted to play this game was to show Wally the strength of his mobile phone products when it was in actual use. He showed that his phone had only lost 1% of its battery while he played the game. Wally didn't know how many times he had been surprised. With such a powerful battery, it was impossible to only use it on a phone. "Can you tell me about the battery?" Wally said impatiently. Harry smiled and nodded. "Of course, this is my main selling point." "I can see the potential," Wally said in surprise. Harry took out a few different batteries from the counter and showed them to Wally in detail. This battery has a lot going for it compared to our competitors. For example, the instant charging technology demonstrated just now, as well as the high capacity, and the long lifespan of usage are the best in the world. Most batteries could be recharged thousands of times before they started to break down. However, Harry's battery could be recharged 1,000,000 times, and its power wouldn't drop too much. Of course, this had its pros and cons. The quality of the battery was too good that people would only ever need to buy one battery for whatever they needed. Wally nodded excitedly, then asked, "Can this battery maintain its normal power under extreme circumstances?" Harry said affirmatively, "Of course. We have already done sufficient experiments. Even in the vacuum of space, and in all kinds of complicated and intense radiation environments, it can still be used normally in high-temperature environments up to 1,000 degrees Celsius. What if the package is broken and the battery is damaged? Will there be a fire or an explosion?" Wally asked. Harry shook his head. "No, I've hit the things with a hammer myself. They remain inert." Wally's heart was about to go crazy. He never imagined that someone could come up with a new type of battery that was so robust. No matter how much Wally liked this battery, he couldn't immediately buy it from Harry. He had to take a few samples back to test to see if what Harry said was true. "Wally, are you interested in my battery?" Harry asked with a smile. Wally nodded without hiding anything. The reason he was excited was because he saw another way to use this battery. Moreover, this method had great benefits and some unspeakable benefits. Wally knew that the European Union's space program had been bottlenecked on some projects because their batteries were too bulky or unstable to be reliable long-term. Anyone with a bit of knowledge would know that not only did space exploration consume an astronomical amount of funds, but it needed the brightest minds and the latest technology. Among them, the space project that the European Union focused on was the Global Navigation Systems Network project. Harry chuckled. He handed Wally a cup of tea and let him sit in the resting area for a while. The booth was an open layout, so the people in the aisle could see what was happening inside. They saw that Wally became so excited, and they immediately started discussing it amongst themselves. None of them had thought that such a small company's booth would actually have a product that could shock Wally. They became curious. As Wally was one of the most prestigious people in the business world, his shock had caused a sensation. Everyone wanted to know what was going on inside the booth. Even a few world-class media outlets were invited to this exhibition. They wanted to interview Harry. All the influential media in the world came to the exhibition. Among them, other than following up on the new products displayed by those big companies, some famous people were also seen at the expo and interviewed by these media outlets. Wally was definitely one of them. As the leader of the European Union's trade group, Wally's trip to the expo attracted the attention of countless people. Such an important matter, and these media outlets couldn't miss it. At Harry's booth from the beginning, no one cared about this small company, but it suddenly became popular. Some reporters jumped on the opportunity. When they found out that Wally had found a good product, they didn't have much time to ask him a few questions. They wanted to see what he was looking at so they could write their articles. Standing outside Harry's booth and looking, they could tell that Harry's products had a lot of promise. A mobile phone with the latest artificial intelligence system, coupled with the independent system framework, could accommodate other systems and software. This was already a very impressive achievement. However, the most surprising thing was Harry's super battery. It was the main attraction. Wally was trembling for a very good reason. He sat in the lounge area of the booth and used his trembling hands to raise the teacup. He drank the hot tea to ease his excited mood. Harry was interested in watching the crowd around the booth grow antsy. Randy and Harvey, who came with Harry, had never thought that they would encounter such a scene. If not for Wally's reputation being too high and suppressing the restless people outside, Harry's booth would have been crushed by them. "Harry, the situation is getting out of control. What should we do?" Randy looked at the dense crowd outside and wiped the sweat off his forehead as he asked. Harry said with a smile, "Calm down, don't get too excited. Just play it cool." Randy was about to cry. "The problem is that there are too many people. They all want to come and see the products. We can't keep them all away right now." "Wally, can you tell us why you're interested in this company?" one reporter asked. The reporters outside the booth could no longer hold themselves back. They shouted at the top of their lungs and asked Wally who was sitting inside the booth. They had to know what Wally was thinking. They could see that Harry had already put his batteries in his electric car, while keeping the price the same as most affordable gasoline cars. The demand for oil was getting higher and higher every year, although there were some new electric vehicles that were coming into the market. Normal electric cars didn't have nearly enough capacity, and their batteries were short-lived. In almost 3 to 5 years, the battery had reached the limit of usage. Replacing the battery cost more than the car itself. As for the endurance ability, an ordinary electric car could run 300 miles on a single charge. Harry's car could go nearly double that amount. More importantly, Harry's electric car charging speed was fast. Ordinary electric cars needed 8 to 9 hours to recharge. Even if it was a specialized charging station, it would still take 3 to 4 hours. Harry's car could be plugged into any normal outlet and be fully recharged as fast as it would take to make a cup of coffee. It would only take 5 minutes at most. Another feature the car had on some models was the ability to charge wirelessly. Some electronics had the capability but weren't explored to their full potential. Harry had found a way to keep cars charging with a pad in a garage or eventually on the roads themselves. Think about it. After a family bought Harry's electric car, they could choose the physical contact charging method. They could also choose the wireless charging section that was specially set up when they drove on the road. They didn't need to stop to charge unless they wanted to, but this came with its own set of problems. As long as it was put into the market, it could completely replace the need for gasoline-powered cars. Everyone knew that cars were using more electronics and becoming increasingly over-engineered. Since everything was working in tandem, when one part broke, it would leave more wear and tear on the other components. Whether it was maintenance or replacement parts, the cost would be extremely high, and a lot of time would be wasted. As for Harry's electric car, it was engineered with simplicity in mind. The car was powered by electric motors which didn't need a transmission system to move the wheels. The simpler the machine, the less likely that it would fail. Maintenance was even easier. Any part of the car could be easily replaced. Everyone present had already thought of the consequences of this pure electric vehicle being pushed into the market. Gasoline cars would be taken off the market because they couldn't compete. The demand for oil going down would make a lot of the big oil companies very unhappy. If the oil industry was affected, it would be a doomsday disaster for the entire world's financial system. Thus, everyone present was worried. Wally looked at the reporters who were asking questions. He was also thinking about this problem. However, he soon laughed. "No one needs to worry about this," Wally said confidently. He looked at Harry with admiration. The technology developed by Harry represents the future of the world. Therefore, even if Harry doesn't show these technologies today, someone else is going to make them sooner or later. Wally finished his words unhurriedly and didn't forget to take a sip of tea. After his excitement, he realized that Harry's tea was really delicious. Harry saw Wally holding the teacup with great affection and smiled. He knew he was addicted to it. The tea made for Wally wasn't a common type of tea. It was a special type of tea that grew on the reflecting moon island of Harry. However, the main focus for the day wasn't the tea. Harry didn't want to make any of his tea well known. He currently didn't have the mood to manage the tea industry. Hence, he only brought it to serve the guests. Although Wally was also curious about what kind of tea Harry had used to serve him. However, he also knew that now wasn't the time to get to the bottom of the matter about the tea leaves. "Wally, can you tell us your answer in detail?" the reporters asked anxiously. They couldn't be blamed for pursuing this issue. In these years, a lot of people made a lot of money from selling oil. If the oil industry was affected, a lot of companies would go bankrupt overnight. These reporters thought to themselves that it made sense that the expo manager had placed Harry's booth in a remote location. They knew that the technology Harry brought was too much of a threat. They just wanted to avoid attracting too many people's attention, so no one bought his products. In fact, this was also the case. If Harry wanted to participate in the exhibition, he must have communicated with the organizers better. In order for Harry to present his products at this expo, he'd send over the specifications and the manager was blown away. Without Harry's battery technology, there would still be people who researched it sooner or later. This was the trend of the entire world. No one could stop it. The oil companies and the expo managers had to discuss this. First, they agreed to Harry's request to participate in the exhibition and asked him to come over. Then, they arranged for him to be placed in a remote corner where no one would notice him. When the exhibition ended, the expo showrunners would send the relevant personnel to contact Harry and see if they could buy Harry's technology and patent rights. Harry was well aware of this matter. However, the super battery was Harry's future. He wouldn't sell it to anyone. Without the patent, Harry wouldn't be able to make any money. The wealth produced would be able to replace the level of existing oil markets. If Harry didn't have enough strength, anyone could just pressure him to do whatever they wanted. This was also the reason why Harry spared no effort to develop his bionic human technology and put it into the production line as soon as possible. Wally had discovered something extraordinary today. He wished he could immediately discuss the technology or the sales and transfer agreements with Harry. However, the reporters outside kept asking questions, which made him unable to discuss with Harry quietly. He could only deal with these reporters first. Wally already had an answer to the reporters' questions. He said unhurriedly, "The financial crisis that everyone is worried about will never happen. Mr. Parker's technology and products are just the next steps toward a better future. But the threat to the oil market is real. Can we avoid the financial crisis?" the reporter asked. "This is actually very easy to solve. The appearance of a new product does not mean that it will immediately overthrow the current global financial situation. We can actually plan to promote it to the market in stages until it naturally changes the current economy." After Wally said that, he didn't have the mood to deal with these reporters anymore. After giving his subordinates a look, Wally's men started to send these reporters away from the scene. Although the reporters were not very satisfied, they didn't dare to offend Wally. He was a very powerful person. Offending Wally was equivalent to offending the entire European Union. The reporters obediently left Harry's booth. The remaining people who were watching the show actually really wanted to enter the booth and take a closer look at Harry's products. However, outside the booth, Wally's men stared with their eyes wide open. Their covetous look made these people give up on the idea. As the crowd gradually dispersed, the noise also disappeared and became quiet. Only then did Wally nod his head in satisfaction and said to Harry, "All right, Harry, no one can disturb us now. Can we talk about some things about your product?" Harry smiled. "Of course, that's the whole point of coming to the expo." Wally said happily, "Very good. I would like to ask if your battery patent is for sale." Even Wally couldn't help but want to hold it in his arms. As the leader of the European Union's trade group, although Wally seemed to be in charge of trade, in fact, he was one of the oldest aristocrats in the European Union. As long as he could increase the strength of his family, Wally wouldn't want to miss it. However, Harry wouldn't agree to sell the one thing that would make him rich enough to take down his own family. The battery technology was so important that Harry would be stupid to try and sell it. He didn't even have the room to discuss the price, so Harry directly shook his head and refused. "Sorry, Wally, I'll not sell the technology. I'll only sell the products." Wally had actually expected Harry's answer. The reason he asked Harry if he wanted to sell the technology was to test him. "All right, then let's talk about the sales of the products. How do you want us to go about selling your products?" Wally said. Harry pushed the contract that he had prepared earlier on over and said, "I only accept the sales of my products as an agent. If you think my products are good, you can be the overall agent of the European Union." Wally took the contract, looked at it carefully, and then said in surprise, "We need to pay 300 million to get the distribution rights for the European Union?" Harry nodded and said, "Yes, 300 million to get the right to represent the European Union, and 30 million to get the right to represent the region. 10 million of it belongs to you, and 20 million still needs to be paid to me." Wally shook his head repeatedly. "Forgive me for being blunt, but this agreement of yours is too harsh. I cannot accept it." Harry smiled indifferently. "It does not matter. You can go back and think about it. But if you don't take this deal, someone else is going to. When the time comes, who will have the authority to represent me? It's hard to say. After all, there can only be one agent." Wally didn't care about Harry's threats at all. He smiled and said, "You seem to be very confident in his skills." "I've done my fair share," Harry said modestly. Wally said bluntly, "You should know that it is very difficult to develop something like this, but it's easy to copy it." Harry smiled confidently. "It's not that simple. If anyone wants to try and copy my products, they'll need 20 years and a lot of money to do so." Regarding the issue of the confidentiality of the technology, Harry had done very well. Harry had done a lot to make sure the technology he had was kept confidential. Even the product itself had done enough confidentiality measures. Buying Harry's product would be easy, but reverse engineering would be much harder. No matter what kind of products Harry had, he had put a lot of effort into building them, especially the super battery. Disassembly of the battery had an anti-tampering device that would melt the insides of anyone who wanted to figure out how it was made. The device wouldn't be very strong, nor would it cause injuries. However, it was still more than enough to destroy the product. No one would be able to figure out what kind of technology was inside. Even if they were to pick up some of the waste inside, it would be impossible to study the composition of the material. Therefore, as long as one wanted to disassemble it, another chemical material would be produced inside. It would corrode the entire battery, causing the original molecular material to disappear without a trace. Therefore, facing Wally's malicious threat, Harry really didn't care at all. Harry was confident. Wally felt a headache coming on when he saw Harry being stubborn. It wasn't impossible for him to not want the technology. He only wanted Harry's products. However, the agreement given by Harry was too harsh. In order to obtain the authority to act as the chief agent, he had to pay 300 million. More importantly, this 300 million wasn't permanent. Instead, they had to pay more every year. It had to be paid in one go, and it couldn't be paid in installments. Although 300 million wasn't a lot of money for Wally, he still had to be stingy in business negotiations. Furthermore, after obtaining the authority, he couldn't earn back the money from the distributor. He still had to give Harry another 30 million. Just the commission alone was unbearable. Regarding the sales of the products, Harry was also unwilling to give up the right to set the price. No matter what price it was up to Harry to decide. For example, Harry showed him a mobile phone. The selling price was $2,000, but he had to pay $1,000 for the goods from Harry. The remaining $1,000 wasn't a pure profit anymore. They still needed to deduct the transportation costs. There were also various miscellaneous fees and so on. It would be good if the remaining net profit could be $600. However, what Wally wanted to do was to be a total agent. He still had to distribute the profits to all the lower agents. Otherwise, the lower agents wouldn't have any profits, and others wouldn't be able to make this product. Hence, after dividing the $600 profits one by one, there wouldn't be much left. Therefore, if Harry refused to let go of the price, Wally would feel very uncomfortable. Fortunately, whether it was the mobile phone or other small household appliances, they all relied on quantity to make profits. Harry's side had the advantage in terms of technology. Once it entered the market, there was no need to worry about the sales. As for the new purely electric car, Harry gave a lot of room for profit. After discussing it with Harry for a long time, Wally finally signed the contract of intent with Harry. In the future, he would be the chief agent of the European Union and sell products for Harry. In fact, the importance of Harry's products was secondary. What Wally valued the most was the super battery. Therefore, after signing the contract of intent, Wally asked, "Regarding the sales of batteries, I wonder if you are willing to take it out for a private discussion." What the two of them discussed just now was the proxy agreement for all electronic products. This didn't include the sales of batteries alone. Wally wanted to use Harry's battery on their satellites. This was the main reason why he sat there and didn't leave. He had been patiently negotiating with Harry. Of course, Harry didn't deny it. "Then let's see what kind of conditions you have. As long as the conditions are suitable, the battery can be sold separately. Could we possibly use it for spacecraft?" Wally explained it clearly. Harry was shocked. He didn't expect Wally to have such an idea. "Space? It isn't impossible. My battery can withstand extremely harsh environments. I don't see why we can't make some adjustments to it for the space program." Wally said happily, "That's great. Actually, I mainly want to use this super battery in space." Harry raised his eyebrows. "Oh, I wonder what kind of space project you want it for. Can you tell me?" Wally nodded. There was nothing to hide anyway. The global positioning system of the European Union had long been known by the world. Moreover, the battery technology wasn't good enough, which caused the project to drag on. This was also a known problem. Therefore, he told Harry about this idea. Harry laughed. "I can guarantee you that there will be no problem. My battery can be used in space, and its lifespan and safety are guaranteed. If you're worried, you can take a few of them and test them out." "Is that really possible?" Wally was surprised. "You are going to be my main agent soon. Call it a gift for product reassurance," Harry said with a smile. He immediately asked someone to bring a few batteries and gave them to Wally. Wally happily accepted the batteries. He originally thought that if he wanted a sample, he would have to wait until he officially collaborated with Harry. However, he didn't expect Harry to be so generous. He didn't need to wait too long. The European Union's global positioning system had been delayed for a long time. It was already a sore spot for Wally. Wally had been one of the biggest investors since the beginning of the project. He had hoped to make a huge profit by relying on the GPS system. However, he didn't expect that the previously unremarkable battery had become his main obstacle. The project had been dragged on for the past few years. Wally was so worried that his hair was about to fall off. However, things had taken a turn for the worse. Initially, he had only come here because he had nothing to do at the expo. However, he didn't expect to encounter the technology he urgently needed at a booth that no one paid attention to. After exchanging greetings with Harry for a long time, Wally left happily. He could no longer stay here. Now he wanted to return to the European Union immediately to test whether Harry's battery could be used on the satellite or not. As for the agents of other products, although they had only signed the contract of intent, since Wally had made an agreement with Harry, he wouldn't go back on his word. Harry wasn't in a hurry. After all, such a large project couldn't immediately collaborate. Both sides would have to discuss the specific details many times later. After sending Wally away, Harry asked Michaela to keep her intentions and restrictions properly. This was the first agent that they had discussions with, and they had to continue looking for him. Everyone ran over to congratulate Harry, but Harry calmly waved his hand. Calm down, calm down. We still have to continue looking for an agent. It's only the European Union. What's there to be happy about? The others were impressed by Harry's calm expression. Randy and Harvey were about to be overjoyed, but Harry remained unmoved. The two of them were happy because they had some shares in Harry's products. Previously, when Harry started operating the super factory and artificial island, they had agreed that they would operate it together. He gave some of the shares of the super factory to the two of them. Harry was the big boss, while Randy and Harvey were the second and third bosses. Charisse, who had been watching from the side, saw Michaela put the contract into a sealed box. She was so shocked that she couldn't close her jaw. She had been saying that Harry's products were not popular at all. At this time, she carefully examined Harry's products. When the reporters were discussing, Charisse had heard every word of it. She was stunned. She didn't know that Harry's products were so scary. It was like selling it would lead to the end of the world. Charisse didn't believe that Harry's technology was so powerful. There were so many high-tech companies in the world that invested tens of billions of research and development funds every year. It wasn't even comparable to a small factory like his. But the truth was that it was so bizarre. Harry's products even shocked the European Union's business group. This was simply unbelievable. Michaela, can you show me the mobile phone that your company made? Charisse asked. Although Michaela didn't really want to talk to her, the person who came was a guest and was too embarrassed to reject, so she handed it over with a cold face. Be careful not to break it. There are still some guests who need to look at it. Charisse thought, it's just a phone, don't be rude. What she didn't know was that Michaela wasn't being petty, but was really afraid that she would break it. Coming here to participate in the expo, they only brought enough models for the display. It was the same for individual models like mobile phones. Each model only had 2 copies. If one of them was broken by Charisse, there would be no substitute products left. Charisse secretly rolled her eyes, then carefully fiddled with Harry's phone. This phone's appearance was indeed very beautiful. The key was that the resolution of the screen was high. It had 16K resolution, which was better than most high-end flat-screen TVs. The higher the resolution, the faster the refresh rate, and the more electricity it consumed. In the end, it was better to return to the battery. Other people didn't have such an abnormal super battery like Harry. Charisse held back the shock in her heart and tried to run the phone again. She felt that it was very smooth. Regarding the system, it ran on Harry's own code. It had comprehensive functions and was very user-friendly. It was better than anything on the market. However, Harry's mobile phone system was equipped with artificial intelligence. The smartphone assistants on other phones were not intelligent at all. Interacting with them wasn't fun at all. However, Harry's phone was different. It carried the smart assistant Zero. It could do anything. It made Charisse think that the person who was talking to her wasn't artificial intelligence at all. Such a powerful artificial intelligence was already shocking to begin with. But what was even more shocking was that Harry had already implemented a perfect network system. Using the phone as a portable control terminal, the user could command Zero to do a lot of things. For example, connecting to their car, automatic driving, and connecting seamlessly with anything Harry produced. No matter how complicated the road was, it would still be able to drive perfectly. It could even be said that it was even more perfect than most experienced drivers. Charisse was shocked, especially when she saw that Harry only took out the brochure, but there was no actual product on the floor. Home Intelligent Butler Robot. Looking at the picture on the brochure, it was like a human, a machine with hands and feet. Charisse was completely shocked by the future that Harry had planned. She noticed that Harry had left a price on the brochure, and it proved to be affordable for any average family. He thought about how everyone would have these products in the future. Charisse was a little excited. She saw the potential of these products and also wondered if she should ask her father to come over and discuss the matter of the dealership with Harry. But then, she felt a little discouraged. Wally was barely qualified to ask, and Charisse's family didn't have a chance. Her father was rich and had a lot of connections, but not enough to make a deal with Harry. Charisse knew what kind of technology Harry possessed. Seeing what he would need to sell to be profitable would need thousands of trunks and employees. Charisse didn't even know how many people worked for her father, but she could guess it wouldn't be enough. The fleet of cargo trucks was another problem. Charisse had seen her father hire a few companies to move products. She thought it would be easier if they controlled the transportation before they asked Harry for a deal. The more she thought about it, the more impossible it would be. She sighed heavily and stared at the brochure with somber eyes and thought, I still have to give it a try. To be honest, Charisse couldn't afford to be distracted by Harry's products after taking a close look at them. She even wanted to not talk about the distribution rights and rely on her family's ability to force Harry to hand over the technology. However, after seeing Wally sign the agency agreement honestly, she gave up on this idea. The business world is like a battlefield, especially between competitors. It could be said that the game between interests wasn't as friendly as it seemed on the surface. Those who didn't have the strength were destined to be swallowed by bigger companies. Harry was a real whale. Luckily, Charisse didn't dare to continue with her plan. The thought of snatching the technology only lingered in her mind for a moment before it immediately disappeared. Her family wasn't strong. It could take on some smaller businesses, but if she wanted to take on Harry, who had a huge impact on technological achievements, even if they succeeded, her family wouldn't be able to hold on to it for long. Sooner or later, a stronger family would steal it from them. When Charisse saw that even Wally didn't dare to attack Harry, she knew that Harry wasn't someone to be trifled with. However, this didn't mean that she had given up on plotting against Harry. Hence, after thinking this through, Charisse immediately changed her expression and said, Harry, I'm sorry. I misjudged you before. You're amazing. Harry didn't comment on her compliments. Oh, really? Don't think too highly of me. I'm just an ordinary person. Charisse naturally listened to Harry's modest words and wouldn't really take them to heart. Charisse put away her smile and asked solemnly, Harry, I'm not joking with you. I can see that your product has potential. Want to set up a deal with my family? We can give you an even better deal than Wally. Randy couldn't sit still when he heard this. Although Harry had given rights to sell where his family operated, the domestic market was for Harvey. Before Randy could say anything, Harvey pressed his shoulder and said in a deep voice, What are you in a hurry for? Harry hasn't made his stance clear yet. Compared to his calm bearing, Randy was indeed not as good as Harvey. When he heard Charisse's words, Randy was the first one who wanted to say something. Harvey knew Harry very well. Harry was a man who was loyal to his friends. Since he had already said that he would hand over the domestic product dealership to Harvey in the future, he wouldn't go back on his word. Furthermore, the domestic market was Harry's most valued market. He could only hand it over to the most trustworthy person to operate. Charisse was merely Harry's sister's classmate. Her family was even more at odds with Harry. She wanted to take away the domestic market with just a few words. As expected, Harry smiled. You sound like you would enjoy some of my tea. Let me get you some. Seeing that Harry didn't reply, Charisse was somewhat anxious. She'd grown up in the business world. She knew Harry was being tactful. She could imagine how much profit Harry would bring if he were to invest in the domestic market. Harry, I'm serious. My family could help you out here. I haven't told you that my family is... Before she could finish, Harry raised his hand and interrupted her. I've got more people to talk to. Go sit with Michaela. As he spoke, Harry got up and left the resting area. Charisse was stunned. She didn't expect Harry to not give her a chance to speak at all. She looked at Michaela with anticipation and naturally didn't get a response. "Sorry, the matters of business are all up to Harry. It is useless for you to look for me." Michaela spread out her hands to show that she was powerless, but her heart was blooming with joy. Charisse couldn't help but regret that she didn't see the potential sooner. If the two of them had a better relationship, Harry wouldn't have ignored her today. But it was useless to regret now. Charisse hated the fact that she had a bad relationship with Michaela because of a little emotional conflict in school. She didn't expect that it would cause her family to miss out on the chance of a lifetime. Charisse wasn't willing to give up. Her mind was filled with thoughts, wondering if there was still a chance to redeem herself and her family. Even if she couldn't get the top spot, she'd be happy with second best. Randy casually walked over. He sneered at Charisse and said, "Little girl, don't think too much about it. Our friend Harvey is the one who is acting as the representative back home. Do you know about the Livingston Group?" Looking at Randy's mocking expression, Charisse's heart skipped a beat. Of course she knew about the Livingston Group. If the Livingston Group had the rights to distribute, then there was no point in asking Harry for that position. The Livingston Group would be able to spread all the sales points across all the cities. Seeing the disappointment in her eyes, Randy didn't forget to annoy her again. "Don't even think about doing another region. Harry has already made up his mind," Randy said with a smile. Harry saw Charisse leave the booth in a daze and nodded to Randy. It wasn't that Harry was too harsh on Charisse. It was because they weren't familiar with Charisse to begin with. He didn't feel like he needed to make sure she was happy. Also, Harry could tell that his sister didn't like Charisse. As her brother, Harry naturally had to be on the same side as her. Originally, Harry saw Charisse staying at the booth and didn't leave, and he already felt somewhat impatient having her breathing down their neck. In fact, at the booth, Harry had brought a staff member who was responsible for receiving guests. Most of the time that would be fine, but Harry knew that he would have to talk to some executives and one of his employees wouldn't be able to answer all their questions. One of those people was one of the managers for the whole expo. The business minister, Seamus, was a member of the royal family in Saudi Arabia. The royal family had very strong control over the country. Strictly speaking, he was still a prince. However, his ranking was relatively low because there were a lot of princes who had the right to inheritance. Seamus was quite old. There were many people in front of him that were in line for the family throne. Seamus didn't have a lot of power because of his position in the family. However, he couldn't underestimate the other party. In the end, he was also a member of the royal family and had a certain amount of authority. Seamus had been made in charge of the entire expo. The fact that it was held so smoothly indicated that he was really good at the job. "Mr. Seamus, welcome to my booth." Harry welcomed him warmly. Seamus was considered a guest, so it was necessary for him to greet him warmly. "Harry, I heard that Wally came to your booth just now. Did you come to an agreement?" Unexpectedly, Seamus didn't say any polite words. He just opened his mouth and asked. Harry wasn't surprised at all. This was their territory. If there were any signs of disturbance, Harry wouldn't be able to hide from their eyes and ears. "That's right. Wally just left. He is interested in my products." Harry didn't say anything in detail. He didn't want to cause a fuss. "Humph, that guy's nose is really sharp. He found this place," Seamus said unhappily. The exhibition this time was actually a very ambitious event for Seamus. His status was getting worse day by day. He needed to make some moves and add some political achievements to it before he gained more power. He was running out of time. He was almost old enough to retire. A trade minister didn't hold much power, at least not as much as the royal family did. There were many people waiting for the new generation, so if an old prince like Seamus still had a seat, no one would be happy. However, Seamus didn't want to give it up just like that. If he didn't have this expo position, his income would be cut by more than half. He wanted to live a life of wealth, and he'd do it with or without his family's help. That's why he poured his heart and soul into this expo to make sure it went well. But Seamus didn't expect that someone like Harry would be at his expo. When he received the application for the exhibition, he saw the items described in Harry's specifications. At first, Seamus didn't pay much attention to them. However, under the panicked reminder of his subordinates, he finally understood how terrifying Harry's super battery was. Once this thing was popularized and used, it would be a disaster for him and his family. After a tense discussion, Seamus realized that rejecting Harry's participation in the exhibition wasn't a good idea. Since this technology had already been developed, Even if he didn't participate in the exhibition, there would be a day when it would come to the market. Therefore, Seamus agreed to Harry's application for the exhibition while arranging a remote booth for Harry. He hoped no one would see the potential of Harry's products. However, Seamus didn't know why Wally had come over. He figured that Wally was trying to find some new technology to make himself rich. The space program had been costing him a lot lately, and they had a lot of problems with some satellites. Seamus knew Wally was desperate, but there wasn't going to be anything he wanted at the expo unless he found Harry. Harry's booth wasn't even that good looking, so it begged the question, why had Wally been interested in the booth? Coincidentally, he had found Harry. When he heard the report from his subordinates, Seamus broke out in cold sweat. If Wally saw Harry's technology, then he'd want to sell it as fast as he could. He immediately rushed over to Harry's booth with his men, but he was still a step too late. When they arrived at Harry's booth, Wally had already left. Seamus never wanted anyone to see Harry's products. He never imagined Wally would wander over to Harry's booth. As the leader of the European Union's Trade and Logistics branch, Wally had the ability to promote Harry's technology. This was something Seamus absolutely didn't want to encounter. His plan to hide Harry's products had failed. Harry looked at Seamus's flustered expression and understood that he was furious. Harry didn't care about the European Union or any other large bureaucratic system. "Mr. Seamus, what are you doing here?" Harry asked straightforwardly. Seamus said very bluntly, "Harry, we're very interested in your super batteries and have come to bid for their patent. Name your price." Harry immediately smiled, as expected. Seamus also wanted this technology. Harry wasn't willing to sell the patent for all the money in the world. Harry shook his head. "I'm sorry, I'm not interested in selling." Seamus pulled a long face and said, "Come on, nobody comes to an expo and doesn't want money. There are no limits to the amount of funds I can offer." Harry couldn't help but laugh at this pathetic man. He thought that anyone that can run such a large expo would be fairly confident in everything they did. Harry shook his head and said, "I won't sell it for any amount of money. The point is moot. The best I can do is give you the opportunity to sell my products." Seamus didn't appreciate Harry's arrogance. Seamus shook his head and said, "I don't want to sell it for you. I only want the technology. You better think about my offer carefully. Don't forget you're only here because of me." Harry suddenly sneered, "Are you threatening me?" Seamus still shook his head. "I'm just telling you the truth. You won't be leaving this place without taking my offer." Seamus had a lot of influence and had already planned to persuade Harry to sell his patents. If Harry didn't know what was good for him and insisted on keeping the technology, then Seamus would have to play dirty. Harry didn't back down when he saw Seamus's veiled threats. "Your threat means nothing to me. We can be friends if you drop the act, or I'll be forced to make you my enemy." Seamus didn't think much about Harry, so he didn't mind Harry's threat. Seamus waved his hand and said, "There are still 2 days left of the expo. That should give you plenty of time to reconsider." With that, he took his men and left the booth. However, after Seamus left, a large number of armed men came to Harry's booth and surrounded it. This was to prevent the others from getting a closer look at Harry's products. Randy and Harvey were very nervous when they saw these men. They ran up to Harry to ask what was going on. Harry shook his head and said, "Don't worry, someone just wants to keep the technology for himself." Randy called out, "I'm already worried. They have already surrounded us." Harry said, "We're in the expo. With so many people watching us, Seamus won't dare to fight me. He is just trying to intimidate me." Indeed, Harry wasn't the only company at the expo. There were companies from all over the world attending the expo. Even if Seamus wanted Harry's technology, he wouldn't go too far at the expo. He could only send people to surround Harry's booth and prevent anyone else from seeing Harry's technology. "Then what should we do?" Harvey asked. Everyone could see the predicament they were in. There was no point in participating in the expo anymore. Seamus had made it clear that he didn't want Harry to have an easy time selling his products. He even wanted to monopolize the technology. Harry thought for a moment and said, "There's no hurry. I don't think anyone with authority knows what's going on here. We should find out how deep Seamus's control goes." After saying that, he ordered his men to go out and investigate Seamus and his reach. Although Harry's booth was surrounded by Seamus's men, they didn't restrict Harry's men from entering and leaving. Half a day later, they returned to report the results of the investigation. "Harry, you were right. Nobody else knows what Seamus is doing here." Harry nodded and remained silent. Harvey said, "Harry, it seems like Seamus is acting on his own. Why don't we file a complaint with his higher-ups and put some pressure on them? Perhaps it will solve the problem. Harry shook his head and said, Impossible. What do you mean? He can't be acting so irrationally without consequences, Randy said. Harry explained, Seamus did this because he saw the potential of my technology and also because he saw the threat to his family's businesses. Anyone with authority that can help us would be no different than Seamus. Harvey nodded and understood a little. That's true. After all, super batteries are too much of a threat to the oil industry. Harry smiled and said, We're on our own here. Something this revolutionary is going to have some drawbacks. After Harry finished speaking, he saw that everyone's expression had become even more solemn. He asked, What's wrong? Harvey said, I'm thinking that if Seamus doesn't give up and wants to take the technology, we won't be able to do anything. Randy said disdainfully, What are you afraid of? I know I won't go down without a fight. Harvey shook his head and said, You can't say that. We don't even have the time and the people right now. Michaela asked worriedly, Are we in danger? Harry comforted her. We're fine. As long as I'm here, no one will hurt you. Harry said to Harvey, What you said makes a lot of sense. So now we have to think about how to get out of here. Randy looked at the guards outside the booth and said in a low voice, They haven't stopped us from leaving. Why don't we leave now? Harvey thought for a moment and said, Yes, as long as we get to the airport quickly, the plane will be ours. Harry didn't agree with their suggestion. He could only say that his thinking was too simple. He shook his head and said, No, this will make Seamus nervous, and he might act irrationally. Harry, on the other hand, wanted to leave right now. He definitely wouldn't fight Seamus head-on without thinking. Although these subordinates sent by Seamus didn't restrict Harry and the others from entering and leaving, they were obviously being monitored. Especially Harry. As long as Harry moved, these people would immediately follow him. Therefore, if he wanted to leave now, he had to fight his way out. Harry wasn't afraid of this. He was mainly concerned that after Seamus knew that he had fought his way out, he'd inform his family. At that time, Harry wouldn't have to deal with Seamus, but the entire royal family. Obviously, Harry hadn't lost his mind to go against someone else in their own territory. Although Harry's family was a lot stronger, he couldn't rely on them. Had Harry been home in Florida, Seamus would be no problem at all to deal with. We can't be reckless. We have to come up with a plan, Harry said in a low voice. He thought about it and made up his mind. He called everyone over. After listening to the plan, everyone agreed. They stayed in the booth for the whole afternoon. After the expo ended, Harry and the others returned to the hotel. As expected, the armed men had been following Harry all the way to the hotel. They divided into several teams and guarded all the entrances and exits of the hotel. They wanted to keep an eye on Harry, no matter what he did. In a villa more than 10 kilometers away from the hotel, Seamus was lying calmly by a wide pool with an expensive red wine in one hand. Around him, there were many beautiful serving girls. One was massaging his shoulders. At this moment, a man came to report. Sir, the expo has ended for the day. Harry and the rest have returned to the hotel. Our people are closely monitoring them. Seamus nodded and said, Did Harry and his people do anything else this afternoon? The man shook his head. No, they spent the whole afternoon in the expo and didn't do anything out of line. They were talking in low voices, though. I think they're planning something. Seamus sneered. Humph, he must be scrambling to get out from under my thumb. The man complimented. He won't last long. I bet he'll give you anything you want to let him go. Seamus smiled proudly. That was what I was thinking. The man knew how to flatter, so he immediately added, It's only reasonable that the super battery should be yours. Only you could handle such a revolutionary piece of technology. Seamus laughed louder. The man opened his mouth but closed it. Seamus was in a good mood. He waved his hand. If you have something to say, say it. You asked me to investigate Harry and his group. I found that Harry is a new upstart, but his two friends are some fairly powerful people. Seamus pulled a long face. Is that so? Tell me the details. The man said, One of them is called Harvey, the only son of the Livingston group. The other is called Randy, and he is a direct descendant of the Banner family. These two men have different identities from Harry. The so-called investigation was indeed very detailed. It had clearly investigated the identities of Harvey and Randy, but that was all. Harry's identity had remained hidden. Seamus didn't have enough money or influence to find out what Harry really was. Ha ha ha, I was wondering who he was. The Livingston Group and Banner family are strong, but they have no power here. Seamus laughed wildly once more. Seamus naturally knew nothing about Harry's true identity. However, he didn't care about Randy and Harvey at all. He wasn't afraid of offending these two families. He had all the power and time on his hands. Once he got his hands on the super battery, no one would be able to stop him. It was enough to make Seamus take a risk. He had a lot going for him and his plan. He also had a backup plan that if all else fails, he'll still get that technology from Harry. Don't worry about those. There's nothing here for them to use. Seamus looked as if everything was under his control. The man pretended to be impressed and said, "Yes, how could they ever compare to someone as great as you?" "Ha ha ha, you're right. Here, take this for your hard work." Seamus liked flattery. He handed out a stack of bills to the man. "Thank you," the man shouted. "You got your money, now leave." The man hurriedly put the money in his pockets and walked away quickly and quietly. Seamus had a very short temper. He liked to be flattered, but he hated to be disturbed. After the man left, Seamus turned his attention back to one of the girls that had been handing him drinks. At this time, he was already drunk. His eyes were hazy as he said, "Sing and dance for me." At this moment, Seamus's phone rang. "This is Harry." When he picked up the phone, the voice inside made Seamus raise his eyebrows. "Harry, have you reconsidered our deal?" Harry's voice on the phone was full of helplessness. "Yes, I've thought it through. With great power comes great responsibility, and I'm not up to the task." Seamus laughed wildly. "Ha ha ha, it seems like you have really figured it out. When shall we meet?" Harry sighed. "Why not now? Do you have the time?" Seamus said with a smile. "Of course I have the time. I've been waiting for your answer." "All right, then come to my hotel. We can do the deal here." After saying that, Harry hung up the phone. Seamus understood that Harry wanted to bargain. However, he didn't care. He didn't plan to get Harry's technology for free. The problem was that they didn't give Harry the chance to talk about money. Now, Seamus felt that Harry was going to ask for a lot of money, with his own resources. Seamus had made a lot of money, a total of 100 billion. He could buy practically anything he wanted, even if Harry asked for a ridiculous amount. With Harry's reply, Seamus got up and started to put on his clothes. Seamus didn't mind traveling to the hotel. He was already very excited about getting the super battery technology soon. He was thinking about how much money he should spend and how Harry would ask for it. He was thinking about whether he should haggle over the price later. While Seamus was on his way to the hotel, Harry and the group were talking in his room. "Harry, is he coming?" Randy asked. Harry nodded and said, "He will be here soon. Stick to the plan." "Great! I'll teach him a valuable lesson." Randy rubbed his hands and said excitedly. Harry was only pretending to compromise. In fact, he wanted to trick Seamus to come to the hotel and then take him hostage. It had to be at the hotel. Seamus's home would be filled with guards. Harry couldn't let his men attack at such a disadvantage. Harry wanted to control Seamus without alerting too many people. Then, he would leave this place before anyone could react. After Harry left, it would be too late for Seamus to make a move against Harry. Even if they wanted to attack Harry in his own territory, it would depend on how courageous the royal family wanted to be. Therefore, Seamus was destined to get nothing tonight. He didn't know Harry at all, nor did he know what Harry was capable of. He foolishly came over to the hotel. Harry had already asked the guards to set up a passage for him to leave quickly. Now they were just waiting for Seamus to arrive. When Seamus arrived at the entrance of the hotel where Harry was staying, the first thing he saw was the subordinates he had arranged to keep an eye on Harry. When the guards saw Seamus coming over, they went forward to report the situation. "Harry's still here, right?" Seamus asked. "Yes, he hasn't left the building," the guard said. Seamus nodded proudly. "Very good. Stay here. Don't let down your guard." After instructing the men, Seamus walked into the hotel. And just in case, he brought more subordinates to protect him. He was about to get Harry's super battery technology. At such a crucial time, Seamus didn't want anything to happen that he didn't want. He brought his men into the hotel and went to the floor where Harry was staying. Along the way, he had arranged for his men to be on the watch. There was nothing special, and everything seemed normal. Seamus gradually relaxed his vigilance. He felt that Harry was going to hand over his technology, and this made Seamus feel even more relaxed. Looks like Harry is a smart man. I might even pay him more for being so quick to see reason. Seamus thought to himself and laughed proudly. Harry had been waiting for Seamus in the guest room. When he saw Seamus, he pretended to be enthusiastic. Welcome, you came at the right time, Harry said. Seamus smiled. Harry, I have to apologize for today. I acted out of emotion, and it was wrong of me to be so harsh. Harry shook his head. It's all in the past. Come. Let's sit down and chat. After saying that, he invited Seamus to take a seat. Seamus sat on the main seat of the sofa. Let's cut to the chase. Your super battery technology, name your price. Harry pretended to look at the others in the room with a troubled look. What? Can you not speak about your terms? Seamus asked. Harry said in a low voice. Seamus, you know how important this technology is. There are too many people in this room. I think we shouldn't let too many people know about our deal. Seamus pondered. For a moment, he couldn't tell what Harry meant. However, Seamus immediately thought that what Harry said made sense. This super battery technology was indeed very important. No matter how loyal their people were, it was inevitable that someone might say something they shouldn't. Knowledge of the deal would be a liability. Seamus agreed to Harry's request. All right, the fewer people that know about the technology, the better. Harry nodded and smiled. Yes, I'm about to hand over the technology. No matter what, we have to keep this technology a secret. The fewer people that know about it, the better. Only then did Seamus completely let go of his guard. It turned out that Harry only let all his subordinates go because of the confidentiality of the technology. Thinking of this, Seamus ordered his guards. All of you can leave. I want to talk to Harry alone. His orders had to be obeyed. Seamus's men checked the other rooms and then walked outside. They didn't see anything special, so they left Seamus with Harry. On Harry's side, he gave a signal to his guards, and everyone left the guest room one after another. Only Seamus and Harry were left to talk alone. Seamus couldn't wait any longer. Harry, we're alone. How much do you want? 20 billion, that's my offer. What do you think? Harry smiled and shook his head without saying anything. He wanted to buy Harry's super battery technology. Seamus was greedy. Seamus knew how important this technology would be. Money wasn't a problem because he knew he could make it all back in no time at all. Harry wouldn't laugh at him. Seamus wanted to take the battery by force. Now he was offering a lot of money. In Seamus's opinion, 20 billion was more than enough. Seamus saw that Harry was smiling without saying anything, so he said again, Is 20 billion not enough? I still have a few oil fields under my name. How about I add on a couple of those fields? Harry wanted to laugh even more. Oil fields were called black gold for a reason. In the past, this would definitely be a huge fortune. But the problem was that once Harry's super battery technology appeared in the world, the oil industry would be the first to be affected. At that time, the demand for oil would plummet, and the oil fields would become worthless. It would be a losing deal. Even if Seamus gave 20 or 200, it wouldn't be appropriate. However, Harry knew that Seamus didn't have much that he could offer. He didn't have a diverse portfolio of assets. Just as Harry wanted to continue talking nonsense with him, the phone in his pocket vibrated. This was a secret signal that they had planned earlier. It indicated that the preparations had been completed and they could act according to the original plan at any time. Harry's originally smiling face immediately turned into a face full of frost. Seamus, you're kidding. You think I'm stupid enough to take such a pathetic deal? Harry reprimanded. Seamus never thought that Harry would turn hostile without any warning. He was stunned by what he saw. He hadn't even realized what was going on in his head, and he thought that he was hallucinating. After thinking for a while, he really thought that Harry was dissatisfied with the conditions. So he pulled his face down and said, Harry, don't you know what's good for you? You should know that I won't just sit here and take it. If you provoke me, you can forget about getting a single cent, Harry said with a cold smile. Do you really think I can? Do you think you can do whatever you want here? Seamus didn't know why Harry's attitude changed so suddenly. He thought it was because 20 billion wasn't enough, which made Harry angry. However, the price Seamus mentioned just now was his bottom line. He didn't intend to negotiate with Harry anymore. Seamus felt comfortable either buying the technology or taking it from Harry. If he wanted Harry to live, he would live. If he wanted Harry to die, he would die. He was kind enough to give Harry money, but now Harry was acting arrogant. Harry, it's useless to be stubborn. This is my territory. My guards outside have already surrounded the hotel. If you want to have any ideas, you'd better think twice about saying no to me, Seamus threatened. He could see that Harry didn't have the sincerity to make the deal. Or rather, Harry had planned to refuse him the whole time. Although Seamus didn't know what Harry was going to do to him. However, Seamus still wanted to turn the situation around. After all, The super battery technology was in Harry's hands. If he didn't hand it over, Seamus would have nothing. Harry no doubt kept the data for his products on an encrypted USB drive that could only be accessed with a password. Seamus even assumed that if he didn't get the password right, the device would corrupt and delete all the information on the drive. Furthermore, Seamus saw Harry's current attitude and didn't think that he would carry such important technical information with him. Therefore, in order to obtain this technology, Seamus could only try his best to hold back the anger in his heart. He tried to persuade Harry to change his mind and hand over the technology. Unfortunately, his judgment was right. Harry didn't have the technology with him. Harry was here to participate in the expo. It was unnecessary to bring the technology, just the product would suffice. Seeing Harry's stubborn attitude, Seamus could no longer suppress his temper. He changed his tactics to coercion and enticement and shouted, "Harry, don't be stubborn anymore. You have no way out of here. Give me the technology or you won't be leaving this building." Harry sneered and said, "What do you want from me?" Seamus held back his urge to fight with Harry and said, 20 billion plus 2 oil fields. Do you think that you can't enjoy life with so much money? You don't need to hold on to this technology." Harry looked at Seamus as if he was looking at a fool and said, "Seamus, just because you're an idiot doesn't mean I'm an idiot. My technology is the future. Won't I earn more money by keeping it in my hands? You want to buy it with just 20 billion? What's the difference between this and daylight robbery?" Seamus said unhappily. "The difference is huge. You are just an ordinary businessman. This kind of technology will be a disaster if you keep it in your hands. Hand it over and you can live longer." Harry smiled and shook his head. "How do you know that I don't have the ability to defend my own technology?" "Why are you so stubborn? I'm telling you now. You have to hand over your technology to me, or I'll take it by force." Harry looked at Seamus and laughed. "Oh, I'd love to see that." Seamus was furious. He knew that there was no way to reason with Harry anymore. He took out his phone and tried to call his men in. However, there was no response after he pressed the phone a few times. Still no response. At this time, Seamus finally woke up and looked at Harry. "What did you do? This is a trap, isn't it?" Harry calmly took a sip of tea and said, "You finally noticed I thought we'd be here all night." Seamus was shocked. He never thought that Harry would dare to attack him here. This was his home. Besides, there were so many men outside, and they had surrounded the entire hotel so tightly that not even a drop of water could leak out. "You better not act recklessly. Even if you've got me locked up here, you can forget about leaving this hotel. Don't even think about leaving this hotel. My men aren't pushovers," Seamus said in a threatening manner. Harry didn't care about it at all. He said while clenching his fingernails, "We must leave. You're right. This is your home. I can't hope to beat you in a fight." Seamus forced a cold smile and said, It's good that you know. Since you understand the situation you're in, let my men come back into the room." He knew that Harry had set up some kind of signal jamming device in this room to stop him from contacting the guards outside. Now that Harry had recognized the difference in strength between the two of them, he wanted Harry to give up on the unrealistic idea of capturing him. However, Harry didn't care about how many subordinates Seamus had outside. If he did, he wouldn't have tricked him into coming here. Harry smiled and clapped his hands. Suddenly, another person jumped out from the ventilation pipe on the roof. When Seamus saw who it was, he instantly felt a chill down his spine. The person Harry called down looked exactly the same as Seamus himself. They looked identical in every way, even down to the small scars and blemishes Seamus had on his face. At this time, he looked at Harry and stuttered, "What's going on here?" Harry's expression was indifferent, and he didn't intend to answer Seamus's question, because this was one of the secrets that Harry had kept up until now. The person who jumped down from the ventilation duct was none other than one of Harry's bionic humans. The reason why he looked exactly the same as Seamus was because the bionic human had a layer of skin. It could simulate the bionic human's skin at a high speed after scanning the target. It could be said that apart from Seamus's memory, nobody could no longer distinguish who was real and who was fake from the outside. Seamus had never been so frightened in his entire life. He had heard about this. Especially many leaders, in order to ensure their safety, they would especially find people who looked similar to them to use as body doubles. They were never perfect, just enough that they could pass at a glance. However, the person in front of Seamus looked identical to him in every way. It even made Seamus hallucinate, thinking that he was standing in front of a mirror, looking at his reflection. "Harry, if you have something to say, say it. You're scaring me. Seamus had to lower his head. He didn't know what Harry wanted to do by calling someone who looked exactly like him. When their negotiations had failed, Seamus had threatened Harry. Now he was so scared that he once again had respect for Harry. He wanted to take the initiative to give in and ask Harry to let him go. Harry couldn't possibly let him go after hearing a few words from him. He looked at him with a smile and said, "Seamus, are you surprised?" Seamus could tell from Harry's attitude that he wasn't going to let him go today. His heart was broken. "What exactly do you want? If you want to fight, just say it." He thought that Harry had gotten someone who looked exactly like him to kill him and then replace him. The reason why he made the bionic human look like Seamus was to make it easier for him to leave the hotel unharmed. "You're not as important as you think. Why would I want to kill you?" Harry mocked. Seamus felt a large sense of relief. "Then what do you want?" Seamus asked doubtfully. Harry didn't answer him. Instead, he received the signals that he could leave. Therefore, Harry indicated to the bionic human that had been quietly standing in the room. The bionic human nodded and walked to Seamus's side. It raised its palm and hit Seamus's neck. Seamus immediately rolled his eyes and fainted. Then it dragged him to the back of the sofa and hit him. Then, Harry and the fake Seamus walked out of the guest room happily. Outside, the guards that Seamus brought over saw them come out. They didn't see anything wrong, so they did nothing. They had never thought that the Seamus they saw all day long had already been replaced by Harry. "Harry, today's discussion was very pleasant. The matter is settled," the fake Seamus said. Harry also looked very happy and replied, "The conversation with Mr. Seamus has increased my knowledge. I've learned a lot of things. If it wasn't for the fact that it was late, I would like to stay with you for a while." Seamus laughed and said, "There's no hurry. Harry, I hope after the expo you stay a little longer and we set up a meeting." Harry said politely, "I won't be a bother to you?" Seamus pretended to be unhappy. "How could you ever be a bother?" Harry smiled and said, "It's settled then. I'll gladly come to see you." "Ha ha ha, very good, very good." Seamus laughed along the way and called all his subordinates to leave the hotel. Walking out of the hotel door, before getting into the car, a guard ran up and asked, "Should we keep our security detail here?" Seamus glared at the guard unhappily. "What are they still staying for? The transaction has already been completed. What's the point of keeping an eye on them?" "I'll let them know." The guard obediently received the order and left. Up until now, no one had noticed anything unusual. A smile appeared on Harry's face as he watched Seamus's convoy leave. He didn't expect the bionic human to be so flawless. If it wasn't for the fact that this was planned by Harry himself, he would have thought that it was Seamus himself. Even Harry was almost fooled by it. No one objected to Seamus's order to remove the surveillance of Harry's men. Besides, the spies in the hotel were eager to withdraw the order as soon as possible so that they could go somewhere to relax. Stakeouts were always long and boring. Therefore, Seamus's subordinates, who had been arranged to monitor Harry in the hotel, retreated in less than 2 to 3 minutes after receiving the order. "All the people who were watching have left." Harry's man came down to report. Harry nodded. "Did you miss anything?" "Don't worry, we've checked everything very carefully. There is no one else." "All right, let's go then." Harry clapped his hands and said, "What about the real Seamus?" the subordinate asked again. Harry turned to look at Seamus, who was still unconscious, and said, "Take him with you. We'll talk about it when we get to the airport."